The January 26, 2006 Methacton School Board of School Directors meeting is now called to order. Please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. There was an executive session held prior to the meeting this evening for the purpose of discussion of a legal matter of student 220582 versus Methacton School District. We'll move on to announcements now. The public is hereby advised of the audio and video recording of the meeting for the purpose of rebroadcasting. The attendance, all school board members are present and accounted for this evening. Moving on to number 5, the recognition. Due to the closing of the schools yesterday and today, we felt it was best to move some of the recognitions to the February meeting. We didn't feel it was appropriate to ask the kids to come out tonight, given that we told them to stay home from school today. So we'll save those things and a few other things for the February meeting. The high school scheduling, Dr. Zerbe.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to ask the board members to please take seats in the front row, and I'll have a presentation in just a few minutes. Good evening, members of the public, school board directors. This evening I will be asking the board to authorize the administration to engage the District Management Council of Boston, Massachusetts to assist the high school administration with scheduling. As the basis for this request to engage the District Management Council, the DMC is a Harvard Business School group that is designed to assist school districts with strategic needs. Their work scheduling is summarized in the attached document to this agenda item, and you can find more information about them on the website at dmccouncil.org. Please know that I am recommending the DMC based on my experience with them for the past 2 years. I have met superintendents from across the country, from districts both large and small, who have utilized the DMC for a variety of strategic needs, with scheduling being the most frequent request. In addition, the DMC is highly regarded for their process of involving people to generate options for organizational consideration. This evening, as I mentioned, the high school schedule is probably the single most difficult school building schedule to construct and is the most important factor in a high school operation. And secondly, the schedule serves as a basis for delivering the intended educational program. The basis of this recommendation follows nearly 2 years of conversations on the matter. A high school schedule, as I mentioned, is the single most difficult building schedule to construct, and is certainly one very hard to understand as well as decipher, but is important in the fact that it is the most important piece of the high school operation. More important, the schedule serves as a basis for delivering the educational program. While I believe that my high school administration does an effective job with scheduling, our current status with strategic planning And the past 2 years of discussions on courses, programming, and scheduling make this a timely process whereby our teachers and administrators, along with other stakeholders, can collectively provide input to a third party that at the very least can affirm that we have just the schedule that we need or can provide us with options for future consideration. There is no perfect schedule. We cannot get all students all of their requests all of the time. However, we must ensure that we have a scheduling process that focuses on student needs. I must also share that over the past several years, there have been some that believe we can improve access to courses for more students by making some changes. The current scheduling process has been in place for a number of years. It is not broken, but deserves a fresh set of eyes and a conversation to ensure we are operating effectively and efficiently. I am recommending the assistance to confirm we are doing all that we can to meet our student needs or to consider options for improving. An effective schedule maximizes the educational opportunities for all students in the most efficient manner possible. Lastly, we are not seeking options for or changes for the 2016-17 school year. I want to be clear on that. However, we would like to begin the engagement starting in early February 2016 for a one-year process that will include a review of the available data, the schedules, as well as focus group and individual fact-finding to gather input. We will keep the board and the public updated quarterly on our activities with a plan to present findings, metrics, and all options and seek feedback from the public. My high school administration and I will make a recommendation in December 2016 if prepared to do so at that time. This particular topic has been discussed to some length in the Finance Committee meeting as a recent meeting, and it was planned for the Education Committee meeting discussion, but unfortunately that meeting was postponed due to weather. This evening, as part of the scheduled speakers, we have First Student on who will follow me in this, and then once First Student finishes their presentation, we'll take questions on this matter as well as matters on First Student from the board, and then proceed with the rest of the agenda with the agenda item on high school scheduling assistance slated for later on in this evening's agenda. So with that said, I'll ask the board members to return back to their seats, and we'll proceed with First Student.
Good evening. As many of you know, some of you don't, new board members on the board here, my name is Randy Williams. I'm Area General Manager for First Student. I handle about 16 locations in central and northeastern Pennsylvania, with Methacton being one of them. In light of some recent events surrounding the school transportation for students of the Methacton School District, and pursuant to meetings with the administration of this district, First Student would like to offer the following action plans related to, number 1, communications, number 2, driver familiarization and knowledge of routes, and finally, driver recruitment. The leadership of First Student fully understands the critical importance of timely communications with the district, and as such, we have developed a comprehensive communication strategy related to communicating to the school district during a late bus event. Current protocol between the district and First Student is to alert the district anytime a vehicle is going to be 15 minutes late in the transportation to or from school for the Methacton students. First Student has developed a procedure with our staff to actually alert the district anytime one of our vehicles is going to be 10 minutes late. This plan has been flow charted and reviewed with our staff down at the bus garage in the offices of First Student Methacton, and during that review, questions and answers were exchanged. And at the conclusion of this meeting, every one of my staff members committed to following the process and to the details outlined. Further agreement was reached and communicated by my staff that failure to follow this protocol will result in potential further disciplinary actions. Secondly, route familiarity and knowledge of routes is also a critical success criteria for first student employees and critical to the safe transportation of your students. When possible, and when advance notice is given of a driver's absence, the location staff will attempt to cover the run with a driver who has been fully prepared and has had time to review the run to be covered, which is the optimal situation. When the need to cover a run is last minute and not optimal due to a call-off of a driver with little or no notice, first student will attempt to place drivers on uncovered runs who are knowledgeable with that particular run, including stops, directions, and nuances of the run, and cover their run with another driver or sub-driver that possesses the same aforementioned knowledge of that run. This is to ensure that drivers know the proper stops, routes of travel, safety issues, and overall efficient operation of routes so as not to impact Methacton students' transportation to or from school. Finally, we continue to recruit, train, and hire the best qualified individuals to transport the students of the Methacton School District. And we do have some very good drivers down there. Recruiting includes our centralized recruitment team utilizing sites such as CareerBuilder, Indeed, and retired military job boards. Further, the Methacton location manager participated in a job fair held at the MCIU 2 weeks ago, trying to look for quality talent. Our efforts to date have been somewhat successful. All routes are now filled with permanent drivers, and we have recently added 2 more sub-drivers, bringing our total sub-ranks to 5. We continue to train and bring on more employees daily. We are trying to add 5 more sub-drivers, which will round out the driving ranks in anticipation of spring sports, which is just right around the corner. Let me reassure the board of the Methacton School District and the administration, Dr. Zerbe, Mr. Whiteleather, Mr. Harney, that we're committed to getting this right, and we are on the right track to being successful. And we thank you for your continued support.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions at this time for Mr. Williams? Sure.
I'm just curious, and I think the people in the audience would like to know, are some of the problems that we've had unusual, or is this working out the kinks of being a new company working with the district?
Anytime you switch from in-house or to contracted or even contracted contractor, there are some rough patches, there is some ironing out. We have had some instances that have compounded and have made this more in the spotlight for the board, the administration, the district, and even for the company. So some of it is just normal growing pains, but there have been some instances that we should have prevented, and in collaboration with your transportation manager, we could have prevented. So there's some of the learning things that we're going through.
When we talked to you originally, before we signed the contract, one of the things that you were suggesting was that you could keep a number of the drivers that we already had. And I think that in the very beginning you did. You had a very strong rate of people staying with you. Is that still the case?
We're experiencing, the first year of the contract we experienced, well, let me back up a minute. When we first converted from an in-house operation to contracted, we actually retained about 97% of the employees, which is huge. That's not very common. So that's a testament to the employees and what they've gone through. The first year we averaged between 2% and 4% turnover, which again in transportation, especially school busing, is very low. The average for school bus transportation turnover in the industry, and that's nationwide, not just here in Montgomery County, but all over, is between 12% and 15%. The second year of the contract, we're 11% to 12%, so we are right in the mix of normalcy. We've retained a lot more than we thought we would, and because when you convert, the everything we went through in the beginning that was made apparent normally takes place. So we do have a good retention of original employees.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Williams, for coming out. I guess the first question is, when was this meeting related to improving communication? And also, can you sort of talk to the point of what the root cause of communication has been the issue? Thank you.
The meeting, I can look in my phone and give you a specific date. It was about 20 to 30 days ago. And we have had meetings generally. Dr. Zerbe, myself, Stuart, myself have had other meetings, but the last specific meeting related to this specifically was between 20 and 30 days ago. The root cause of communication, again, first student will own what we failed to do. There have been times when a bus was running late more than the 15 minutes even. We've again established our protocol of 10 minutes, but there have been times when it's run more than 15 minutes late, and for various reasons, whether the driver didn't contact us or it got busy in the office, not good excuses, we did not alert Ms. Lynch or anybody at the district as a protocol was. So again, we will own everything that we've come through, and that really is the root cause. It was lack of a clear and defined plan, and sometimes a lack of carrying out that plan.
As a follow-up, I guess to Andrea's question, last year, I think the general impression is there weren't as many communication issues or as many problems. Mm-hmm. So wasn't that part of the process last year?
It was, and I don't believe we had as many communications problems last year. I was on the front line last year, probably a little more than I was this year, and we didn't experience those same communications issues, no.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. I think my first question is, if you take a look at, your results of the meeting in your 10-minute versus the contractual 15 minutes, how many times this year, total routes over, how many times have you missed on the 10-minute or the 15-minute notice?
If I were to just surmise it, again, not having the specifics in front of me, I would say between 5 and 10 times. Now, I can give you an example. Last week and the week before, we had situations where the bus was 10 minutes late. The communication plan that we've established in the interim now seemed to work seamlessly, whether we dealt directly with Ms. Lynch or we went to the second step. I think Kreider is her last name. And of course, Mr. Law's communication with him. So it's been between 5 and 10, probably on the higher side.
And I know you said that the penalty could be some kind of disciplinary action for the employees that don't take action. So what's the penalty that the bus company, so the big bus company, how you deal with your people is one thing, but what penalties are there that exist either with our contract or other contracts for these types of misses?
There are, and again, I don't have the list of liquidated damages that are in our contract. In our school bus contract with the school board or the school district, there are various liquidated damage clauses, and I truly do not know what is in there for communication, if anything. I don't recall the specifics.
So when you say liquidated damage, you're talking about your fee at risk, or
Yes.
actually a liquidated?
Yeah. Well, no, liquidated damage that can be assessed against our fee. So, we submit our monthly bill, and it's a deduction from that bill for whichever piece the liquidated damage is being assessed for.
Okay. And my last question is, what percentage of your drivers are cross-trained at this point in time so that you can run multiple routes if you have an issue?
Well, again, seeing as we have about 85 to 87% of the original Methacton drivers, a very good portion of them are cross-trained because these routes don't change very often year to year. So, I'd be very comfortable to say at least 10% of the drivers are cross-trained, if not more.
And is that sufficient based on your experience and industry knowledge to cover?
I'm sorry.
To cover the gaps that come up?
Traditionally, we endeavor to work with a 10% bench of sub-drivers, And normally, your sub-drivers are the ones who are cross-trained the heaviest, the most. We're currently at about a 5% bench. So with the existing veteran drivers who have the professional knowledge of this district for many years, we feel that we have drivers who we know almost every run there. And then there are other drivers who know the more simpler runs. And that's really what you're doing. You're taking the more intrinsic and the more detailed runs most times and trying to cover that with a veteran driver who may have a little bit more simplistic run that you can then cover with a less veteran driver that has less nuances to it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
So if some of this can be attributed to turnover, and we're at the average, which is significantly higher turnover rate than we had previously when we had our drivers in-house, what steps are we taking to prevent this happening and becoming an annual occurrence?
So again, we have instituted a couple of different programs for our staff as well, because anybody in transportation, whether it's school busing or trucking or whatever industry it is in transportation, cement companies, there is a driver shortage. So we have to now focus more on retention, and not more than we focus on recruiting, but we all realize that recruiting pool is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, at least for now. So we are focusing heavily on retention. We just completed it's a 16-hour training course for every one of our staff, and that's location managers, dispatchers, tech in charges or shop managers, routing personnel, safety people, and regional staff. It's called Be Safe, and it's based on Aubrey Daniels International, ADI. And it's positive reinforcement, it's positive praise, and it's recognizing for the things you do well. For most of my adult life and many people working in industry, you're taught, find out what they're doing wrong and fix it. And we, and Aubrey Daniels actually, again, developed this, are realizing that we need to recognize people for doing things right, for doing it right the first time, every time, praising them, which then hopefully gets the other people in the workforce going, hey, wait, I want that same praise. So we're focusing more on retention. Well, again, not more or less, but we're heavily focusing on retention now because that recruiting pool is tight. We continue with the recruitment efforts. The best guarantees I can give you is that we are going to continue a full court press through the length of our contract and beyond to attempt to ensure that this doesn't happen.
So we have another company that is covering some of the routes that you've not been able to cover.
Mm-hmm.
What is your projection for the next school year as to your ability to be able to be sure that we have all the routes covered and that we have timely busing?
So our projection is we're going to be able to cover those 4 runs again. The location manager in place is, again, doing a great job with recruitment or retention and continuing to recruit. There was a period of time when we had drivers in our pipeline, applicants in our pipeline, and they sat. If you don't touch an applicant within 72 hours, you pretty much lost them, and that's any industry. So Amy Huffman, who's our location manager, has done an excellent job with ensuring she's in, looking at the possible and potential applicants, contacting them, interviewing them, getting them into the system, and getting them hired. Well, if they're qualified, getting them trained and hired. So we're confident for the new school year we'll be able to take the 4 runs back and still have the bench or the sub-drivers for the backfill, for call-offs. Sure.
Any other questions? I know it's been an important topic for us all. I just want to make sure all the board members got all their questions answered. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Appreciate it. Now we're going to go on to item number 6, reports. The first ones I'll take. There's the KIT committee assignments. With the reorganization of the board, we created new teams for each of the committees that we're moving forward with. And this has been publicly available on our website now. For the Education Committee, we have Andrea Reese chairing that, with Brenda Hackett as the vice chair, and Paul Winters will be on that board or that committee as well. The Finance Committee is going to be headed up by our chairperson, Michael Ryan, and Paul Winters will be the vice chairperson. and Scott Dorn and Brenda Hackett will be on there as well. Our policy committee will be headed up by Kim Aubrey-Larsenese as chairperson. Andrea Reese will be the vice chair, and Michael Ryan's on that as well. The property committee, we have Scott Dorn as the chairperson, and Jim Phillips as the vice chair, and Kim Aubrey-Larsenese and Herb Roth included on that. And also some of our representatives, the MCIU term representative is a 3-year term, and Brenda was already in that role, so Mrs. Hackett will continue in that. The NMTCC representatives, we have Herb Roth and Andrea Reese. Then our liaisons for Act 48, we have Paul Winters. And then curriculum liaisons for the foundation, I'm taking on that role. And for the home and school liaison, Brenda's going to continue in that role. For Lower Providence Township, we don't have that posted yet, but Michael Ryan's taken on that role. And the MCIU legislative representative will be myself, and then the PSBA legislation liaison is Paul Winters, and the last one we have a TBD around is Worcester Township liaison. Okay. The next topic is working sessions. There's been a lot of comments in the past about bringing back working sessions, and we're having discussions around that. The idea we're putting forth and wanted to have some comment or discussion about is the idea of having working sessions that focus on kind of our two most critical areas and how to incorporate those into our monthly meetings, and that's around the education and the finance. And I'd be curious to hear if any of the board members have any thoughts on incorporating those working sessions into the meetings.
I would personally be thrilled to have those reinstated. However, I would like to hear from some of the previous board members their thoughts, having been through it, and also I think some of you being here when they were taken away. So being a new member, I like this. I think it's great, but I also respect that you all might have other input.
I'll go right in on that if you want. And since I've been a proponent of bringing back the work sessions as well, I feel that the work sessions have been, at the time that we decided not to do them, the intent was there to have the work done at a more committee level. And while it worked good for some things, it did not allow the board to deliberate on topics on the agenda at a more meaningful time. For example, an item for voting would occur tonight. If there was a lot of discussion on that, currently, whereas in the previous board, if there was too much discussion, we'd have to table it, and maybe we'll do it next month. Having that item as a reviewable item for a work session, you can have that discussion at your work session, which is what the point of a work session is, to go over your agenda, to itemize everything on there, to nail down every point. If board members have questions on this item, they can get, maybe they need some more information from administration. Administration has some time to get that to them, and to make an informed decision at the following week's board meeting. That, in my mind, has been the definition of a work session, okay, to finalize that agenda. You go over everything. One of the things that's happened in the past, with past administrations, not necessarily this one, but even with Dr. Quinn's, is that the work sessions were used for voting items, some of them serious things. Contracts, approving contracts, things like that were held at work session meetings. I do not want that to happen at all. I'm not in favor of that. To me, any items that should be voted on by the board should be held at the regular meeting. The work sessions were also done in a more roundtable format. We've held them at different schools. That was nice, but logistically wise, it didn't always work out well. And you could really, you could reformat this table to have that discussion easily. But the thing was that the main goal of the work session I'd like to see is to engage dialogue between the board. And that's what we need, especially when you have 6 new board members and you're covering a topic that may have been from the previous board, and now it's dovetailing into this new board. You're going to have time to cover that and go over it. The administration is going to need to give that information up, and that information should be out in public. And again, that's what a work session is, in public. My questions then to you, Mr. President, is how are you going to incorporate an education and finance committees into work sessions when those are specifically things that should not be going on inside a work session discussion? The work session is for the covering of the following week's agenda. Now, granted, you can add things to that agenda in between the work session and the actual board meeting. In fact, there's been in cases before where you've had placeholders in there where we may be covering this, it may not be there. So the agenda at a work session may look very different than at the board meeting itself. But my question really is how you're going to have those two things go in there, because I've looked at the meeting schedules, and you've listed some of these things as work sessions, and it looks like you're alternating them between education and finance, or education and, finance committee. If something is important, like for instance, you're talking about budgetary things for the finance committee, I would consider then having the finance committee meeting as a whole and having the whole board there. In other words, as many board members there as possible, especially when you're getting close to the budget dates. For instance, in that May 24th board meeting when we have to vote on our final budget adoption, that finance committee meeting should be a committee meeting of the whole, okay? So that the board has everything it needs to go over regarding that budget, and if there's anything between that meeting and the final board meeting, you have some time to get those questions answered. At a work session, I don't believe that's the proper place for that. I think you need your work session time to deliberate the items that are on the agendas, okay? Sometimes we've had meetings here that have gone to 11 o'clock at night. Quite frankly, I'm spent at 10 o'clock. I'm done. That's it. I'm checked out, So I think that you really need to focus that work session on the agenda items and not education or finance committee trying to dovetail those two into there. I just think that's, not what a work session is for, not the definitive definition of a work session. Thanks.
I really appreciate the history and all the thought you put into that. The idea, to give you some framework, the idea behind having it be finance and education focused is we felt that those were the two most important topics that we need to focus on. So alternating between those two would allow us to focus on those two topics. It may be more appropriate to consider what Mr. Roth discussed, where it's really focusing on all the items for the upcoming board meeting. And I think everybody would appreciate that if we can make our board meetings more efficient.
And also, the work sessions were used for, in the past, is an opportune time for presentations, like from certain groups within the district, rather than having them all at the board meetings. Sometimes you have 2 or 3 presentations, it can make a board meeting very long. So having that work session is another ability to do that. The one thing I was thinking of while you were talking about that is if you have the education committee meeting / work session like May 17th, okay? The only thing I could see doing that is if you had that in lieu of presentations for that time slot, because going through some of the agenda items on the agenda, I mean, they're really placeholders. There's a lot of stuff going on that really doesn't need to be discussed. You know what I mean? So your work sessions will not run typically as long as a regular board meeting unless there's a hot button topic on there. But if you wanted then to say, okay, education committee meeting at this following work session, if you have something you really want to bring to the board, whether it be a pilot program, like the math program that we just did, or something like that, I could see doing that, or even with finance committee meeting, talking about bond restructuring or something like that, that would be beneficial to the board. I could see doing that. Is that kind of what you were thinking, or I didn't think you were going to have a whole education meeting there during the work session?
I think what we wanted to focus on were topics that needed more attention than just perhaps the committee member and all the board would want to weigh in on that could attend the meeting. So I think a lot of things you were describing are things that, we'd like to get some thoughts and input from the entire board and pull that out of the board meeting and have it at those working sessions. Does anybody else have any thoughts or comments on it?
Just a question. The way the schedule reads, it shows Finance Committee meeting / work session. Are you suggesting they are two separate meetings, or is there a body of the Finance Committee meeting that would happen and then it would be expanded to a work session?
The actual logistics within the time frame we've been talking about, but we haven't fully vetted that yet. But the idea is that part of it, that time frame would be for the full board and the working session, and then part of it would just be for the committee to focus on some of the items. So it would be over that one time period would be both.
Are they two separate meetings then on the same night?
Yeah.
So we would have to establish a time
Yes.
when the work session would begin?
Yes.
Okay. Having attended Finance Committee meetings, for example, and Education Committee meetings as well, it would be important to allow a significant amount of time for those committees to be able to do the work they need to do, particularly the Finance Committee in this portion of the year, because there's a lot of work to be done budget-wise.
Definitely. So I think we can try to put some more clarity around this and define it better. And, we don't have to finalize it tonight. I just wanted to start the discussion around it. And we can try to work through some of the things that came up.
Okay.
Yeah, Jim. Or Jim.
Good evening. Give you an example. We'll say tonight's your typical work session. As you see how we have our agenda set up, work session, I would use the work session just like the agenda set up here, where you have your reports far as Finance Committee, Property Committee. When you come to those placeholders, the chair of that position will then take over the meeting, and the committee members will discuss, we'll say, Property Committee. The Property Committee chair will take the meeting over. The discussion will be amongst the committee members. The whole board can be present. They'll be able to hear it, but they conduct their meeting. And you just move down through the whole agenda. That way, everybody's on the same page. As far as the Finance Committee, depending on how long their meeting would last, you can even have them there and everybody hear it. Then the voting meeting, you can get rid of everything down to line 7 where you have public comment on board action items, and then go through the meeting and have the vote. And it could be a relatively short meeting. You could have your presentations beforehand on that evening. But what you'll find is if you have the work session and then you have all these individual committee meetings throughout the course of the month, you're in meetings up to your ears, nobody's on the same page, and the inefficiencies that will happen where board members won't be up to speed with other ones, and there will be a lot of questions, and it makes Dave very busy answering questions that if everybody was there when the committee was having their meeting, they'd be all on the same page. Just a suggestion.
Oh, that's very good insights.
Chris, I think the idea is that from my perspective, that you could every other month bring in Ms. Landis to talk about something at the high school, so that the balancing of the education and the finance alternating months, because it's that balance that we all need to be involved in, not just those on the committee. So I think that's the purpose of the working session, to have more of an emphasis on those. I realize that there's I think the principle of, I'm not really worried about how long these things are, honestly, at this point. I think we just need to have the proper discussion in the open forum. So I would suggest that we go ahead and vote for this and realize that the working session is a working session, that we need to work through it and figure out exactly how to work through it, but I think we should publish a schedule as is.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I also would like to add, since we're on the topic of committees and all these things, and I know that I guess it was you who decided to disband or do away with the HR committee. I'd like to know how we're going to handle the HR decisions and the HR work that we used to do then.
Well, the guidance I was provided is that most of the critical discussions around that are in executive sessions, and that's where most of the HR was being addressed.
Okay, so you want to do most of that HR then during executive sessions of the board then, as a whole?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to chime in along those lines, anyone from the public who has been to the HR meetings, generally, it's normally about 10 to 15 minutes long. It is normally very short. Mr. Harney has his list of things. Most of them are very matter of fact. The things that we do have questions on or may look off to us or frequently would be asked at that meeting. I would assume that we could do the exact same thing here. We could give him his 10 to 15 minutes of time or however long it would be to go through his list of things. And then just as we would any other way, we could bring up our questions right at that moment. It would seem to eliminate a night of meetings if that is a concern for certain board members, and we could just put it into either the board meeting or as part of a working session. That's at least how I could say it could work well.
Okay, any other comments? So one approach that we can do, we don't have to vote on this. It's not a voting matter. One approach we can do is we can actually try it out, okay? We can go with the Finance Committee working session, which is the first one teed up for the 16th. Try to incorporate a lot of everybody's individual comments in terms of how we would allow it to flow and all that, and I'll try to publish that out so we can see the flow of the meeting and give it a try and use that as a learning curve. We aren't going to cover all the topics in this approach, but we'll at least cover the two key topics. And I think it's a decent compromise between having a working session that covers all topics and requires a full another night commitment from all the board members to bringing it in and focusing it on a night that we have an existing meeting. So, my recommendation for this is let's go forward and give it a try and see if it works for us.
Now, are you talking about the schedule or just the work session itself? The board meeting schedule or just the work sessions?
I'm talking about having the work session tied on to the dates that are in the schedule, and we can dovetail that right into the next item.
Okay.
Which would be the committee and board meeting schedule.
All right, got it.
Okay. All right, any other comments? All right, then we'll move right along. In terms of reports, we have the Finance Committee. Mr. Ryan?
I just want to get one piece of clarification. So would it be then the interest of the board, if we're going to try this out, that we publish the dates for February? Or am I publishing the dates as the draft is so before you in regards to the dates of committee and or work sessions? Just trying to get the clarification.
Okay.
Could I ask a question, too? Are you saying that this schedule is the schedule that you would like to use? Because you mentioned that it was the next item, but then I thought you were going to talk about it because I wasn't talking about it under work session.
Okay. Yeah, the committee board member schedule, yes. So I left it as we were going to try this out with the February Finance Committee to see how it works out for us, tagging that work session into the committee meeting. Now let's talk about the the draft schedule, and Dr. Zerbe brings up the point that he needs guidance on what to publish, which, does anybody, yes?
We have a comment, right?
You always have a smile, too, that's good.
Oh, well, good. So jump down to May's schedule.
Okay.
May 2nd is scheduled to be the Finance Committee meeting, and if I'm not mistaken, that might be a little tight for us to get financial information from the previous month. And given that that is a critical month from the standpoint of budget, it's very important for us to have as much current information as we could have, and I would welcome a comment from Stuart if he has any thought on that subject.
Well, excuse me. Well, obviously, just because of the early nature of that particular meeting, I would not have prior month's financials ready for discussion and presentation at the committee meeting. So your statement is accurate.
So we should revisit the date for that.
We can. This was designed as a draft for the board's consideration, and comments like yours, Ms. Hackett, are certainly appropriate. There may be a need for us to, as individuals, just revisit this and then provide feedback to the board president, and then he and I can work on addressing a more comprehensive schedule that includes your input. Would that be appropriate? Is that what you'd like to do?
So why don't we do this? We'll publish February. Everybody take a look in the out months, and if you have any comments or concerns like that, the valid concern that Mrs. Hackett has, please get back to me and we'll work on revising it. Okay?
The only thing I would just add is, since the education meeting was canceled yesterday, I don't know if you would like to add one for February before we publish February.
Good point. All right.
Could I just add one other thing?
Sure.
I noticed that there are several different starting times, and I wonder if that's, I think we can keep track of it because we'll put it in our calendars, but is that complicating the life for the public if we sometimes start at 6 and sometimes at 6:30 and sometimes at 7?
Yeah, I think the 6:30 timeframe was to accommodate, I think we have several members that are on both committees for a particular evening. So, for example, one board member might sit on property and then also sit on finance, and if they were going back to back, it was more conducive for the individual board members to start at 6:30, get an hour meeting in for property, and then sit for the remainder of the time in finance.
Okay. So the 6th was only this month then, the one item, education. That was the only 6 o'clock. Oh, no, property.
Yeah, there's some other sense.
Lastly, too, and just to make sure we get our ducks in a row this time, the last date, December 5th, reorg board meeting, can we make sure that that is an accurate one? Does it have to be after the first Monday of December or on the first Monday of December? Because that's the first Monday of December, so if it has to be after, that means it has to be on the 6th.
That is the correct date.
You're going to have it on a Monday?
Yeah, it has to be it's the first Monday in December.
Okay, it's being recorded, so. Thank you.
I'm glad you brought that up. Any other comments?
Hey, Chris, I would
Yeah.
say that February 8th Property Committee meeting, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't make it 6:30 just to be consistent with all the other start times the balance of the
That's a
year.
good point.
I think it was a typo.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll just make them all the 6:30. Okay. Any other comments?
I just wanted to comment, I'll have Ms. Coons reach out to you as Education Committee Chair to confirm the date and to get education for February, okay?
All right, let's move along. Finance Committee, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. President. On January 19th, the Finance Committee held their first meeting of the year. In attendance were all members of the committee. There were 4 items that were up on the agenda for that evening, the first of which was the 2016-2017 preliminary budget. Mr. Whiteleather reviewed the proposed budget for the year, and Finance has moved that budget forward to this evening for board approval. I will note that please keep in mind that this is the preliminary budget. There are many moving parts to this, and this will not be what the final budget looks like come May. The second thing that was discussed was the 2009 general obligation bond refunding. Mr. Whiteleather reviewed that Phase 1 has been completed. Phase 1 resulted in about $1 million savings. Phase 2 of the bond refunding will hopefully be completed shortly. We're actually looking for, the initial was supposed to be about a $2.5 million savings. It's actually looking like it'll be more like about $3 million, so that's good news for the district. And once Phase 2 is finished, we will make sure that the administration and in Finance Committee, we will bring forward what that looks like on a yearly savings basis. The third item was the high school consultant, which you have all seen the presentation from Dr. Zerbe this evening. And finally, the monthly reports were gone over. Mr. Whiteleather, and as many of you know, still that for the current budget, our biggest hurdle is the lack of a state budget being passed. However, Methacton School District did receive a $7.8 million subsidy payment on January 5th to help our burden a little bit there. And finally, we had several members of the public make comments. Mr. Pelicano had questioned severance payments from June of 2015 and their impact on the current year budget. He also had questions regarding salaries and how the projections were made on expense categories. Mr. Andrews had some comments regarding the high school consultant, some teaching efficiencies and teacher-student ratios. He also made some comments regarding the local economic situation, and he had a couple questions regarding the descriptions on the bills list. Mr. Bickelman had a question regarding the 2 days off during the holiday break for some of the administration. That turned out to be basically a 12-month staff and how they were paid. And Mr. Kohler finally had some questions regarding funding levels for Methacton versus the area school districts and why there were some discrepancies, why some would receive more and some would receive less based off of how close in proximity or number of students they are to us. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. And now the Property Committee, Mr. Dorn.
We did not meet in January. The last time we met was, or the committee met was in November 9th. Jim, can I turn it over to you or Herb to comment on that?
Well, almost 3 months ago, we spoke about the RFP for the feasibility study for the district. Also, the field lighting, and I imagine, Dave, you might have an update on field lighting coming to your report, so we'll leave that for that moment. And that was about the extent of our meeting.
Thank you. And now moving on to the Education Committee, Ms. Reese.
We did not meet, so I have no report, but next month.
All right, thank you. Policy Committee?
Same response, no meeting this month.
All right. The IU, Ms. Hackett?
The IU meeting is tomorrow night. The last meeting we had was in November, and that was reported at the November meeting.
It's been a slow time period, hasn't it? The Monco Tech, Mr. Ross or Ms. Reese?
Actually, Monco Tech has had 2 meetings since our last board meeting.
right.
There was one in December, which I will report on, and one in January, which Herb will report on. Little plug, and since it's a new year, explain to everybody briefly who don't know what North Monco Tech is. It's a really fantastic educational experience, and I'm thrilled to be part of it, so thank you for allowing me to do that. Just to give people a really brief idea who are unaware, Wissahickon, Perk Valley, North Penn, and Methacton all get together for this great technical center, and it's kind of my job to relay all that happens and Mr. Roth's job to relay all that occurs, and We were treated to a wonderful holiday dinner provided by the staff in December, provided by the students, excuse me, and they ask us to remind you that there is breakfast and lunch served there every day. So look into on the website. There's a salon and other services offered as well. And the director there, Michael Lucas, is very informative and helpful to us as new representatives, and there are 2 reps from each school district, as well as a superintendent that represents all of the superintendents as well. And we have an orientation next month as well as a meeting.
January meeting was held on the 20th. It was also a board appreciation night, and they had a wonderful little spread of food for the board and treated us all to a chocolate mousse cake, nice individual, which was excellent. And going to what Andrea says, the breakfasts and the lunches are incredible. So, but anyway, it was a relatively short meeting, but there was one interesting aspect of it that I would like to report on tonight. And there was a fellow named Chip, and I did not get his last name, but he's from the Meadow Institute, and he's actually an owner of TW Metals, which is a manufacturer of raw material that is then used by companies to form things. Could be anything regarding metal. There is a drastic shortage of machinists and manufacturing areas in this field. And they've come up, the metals, there's a group called the Metal Service Center Institute has come up with an idea of where they are using actual, people in this industry to actually recruit and try to get folks to be involved in this field, to the point of where they presented a check for $4,700 to the North Monroe Technical Career Center for marketing, advertising, and also promoting those fields. And any student that goes into those fields is pretty much guaranteed a job. They have 100% placement to graduates of those fields. So again, it's something that is an industry that needs people. They need kids to go into this field. And it was very enlightening to see an actual businessman, a person from a company, coming to the tech center and saying, look, we really need kids to get into this field and be machinists. And it's not just, there's so much more to it than just maybe spinning a lathe or something like that. There's programming and all kinds of things going on. So it was very interesting to see that there's groups out there trying to really market this and change the image of, not just being a machinist, but actually making it a career, and a very good one at that. So they are going to have another topic here. They're going to have their open house February 11th from 6 to 8 p.m. They're going to have door prizes, and having attended an open house before, I will tell you that the Adirondack chairs are always a high bid item. And as Andrea said, they have board orientation on February 17th at 5:30. So other than that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Now for our student board representation.
Thank you. On behalf of the school, as half of the school year has come to a conclusion, on behalf of the senior class, I'm sure we are all excited to see where many years of our education will take us. Most that plan to attend college are looking forward to a new life of independence and contribution to society. I myself am excited to see how I will develop my career and meet new people, really. For those of you who may remember, last year, with the help of the NHS, National Honor Society, and the entire community, the Mother's Day Baskets Initiative raised 50 baskets worth of donations for underprivileged mothers in our community. This year, with the continued support of the National Honor Society and Methacton community, we look to exceed that goal and help more mothers this Mother's Day. In the music community, the play is underway with the show coming in almost a month, and the indoor percussion as well as the indoor color guard also continue to learn their show for future competitions. And though the recent snowstorms have definitely contributed to some impediments that I'm sure we'll be able to overcome. So check out at our music programs, and thank you. Liza?
Good evening, everyone. So in sports, Methacton students continue to shine. The Methacton boys swimming team prospers with leadership and great performances from seniors Gil Price, Austin D'Angelo, and Paul McGlynn. Currently, they boast a 3-1 record and a third-place standing in the Pac-10. The girls swimming team also has a 3-1 record and is currently in second place in the Pac-10. 3 of our female swimmers have qualified for the PIAA district meet, and 4 more are very close to qualifying. The wrestling team is coming off of a major win over its Pac-10 rival, Perkiomen Valley. They're led both in points and leadership by Bryce Reddington and Dylan Henry. The boys basketball team holds 2 wins over Perkiomen Valley and recently defeated Boyertown with the game winner by Patrick O'Neill with 6 seconds left. The team is led in points by senior Stephen Savage and by junior Patrick O'Neill, and senior Tom Neugebauer also recently committed to St. Vincent. Finally, the girls' basketball team has had strong victories over talented Lansdale Catholic and Fleetwood teams and is competing well with Pac-10 competition from Perkiomen Valley and Springford. The highest scorer is Ryan DiOrio, who also holds the 4th most three-point field goals in the Pac-10. Some other highlights by students at Methacton include recent first and second place awards in New Jersey and Virginia badminton competitions to freshman Aaron Zhang. Finally, Eagleville recently took part in Star Wars-themed reading activities organized by reading specialists to promote reading and making reading more fun. Congrats to all of our students.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, the superintendent report from Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a few items: field lighting, a board orientation update, strategic planning, and 2016-17 school calendar and school consolidation. Those are some items that I'll discuss here or present here this evening. Regarding field lighting, please be advised that there has been progress on the construction of field lighting at both the stadium and auxiliary turf fields. Prior to the recent snowstorm, we've seen that there were 5 total pegs installed to date. The pegs are really bases that support the light poles, and there are 2 on the stadium field at this point and 3 on the auxiliary field. I will be providing a written public update with pictures on the lighting progress next week. While weather has cooperated with us so far, well, until recently, we anticipate that the construction of lights will be complete by the end of March 2016. Regarding board orientation, while we may not have had certain committee meetings or a lot of activity, I think it's important to update the public on some recent work that has taken place with regards to preparing 6 new board members for their leadership roles as part of this board of 10. Based on input from previous school boards, the following activities took place as part of new board member orientation program. On November 21st, 2015, new board members attended the PSBA New School Director Training. On December 9th, 2015, I held Methacton building tours with building principals. So members participated in visiting all 8 school buildings. On December 16th, 2015, new board members attended the School Board Basics Workshop at the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. And on January 5th, we had 2016, we had the support staff directors present programs and services to educate the new board members on what we do on the support side of the district. And then on January 12th, 2016, we had the academic directors and building principals present programs and services that they oversee and buildings that they oversee. So these orientation sessions by no means provide new board members with all that they need to know, but has been a good starting point, I believe. I just want to say thank you to all those that participated, and I appreciate your participation and interest. With regards to strategic planning, more than 75 individuals came together on Saturday, January 9th for district strategic planning. This includes students, parents, seniors, teachers, business leaders, and school administration. Participants worked in one of 5 subcommittees throughout the morning. Members analyzed strengths, challenges, opportunities, and threats, or called the SCOT analysis, of their respective areas and developed goals for consideration in the development of a 6-year strategic plan due in April of 2016. The 4-hour session featured lively discussion and subcommittee work with resulting data and analysis serving to inform the work of the district's administration and strategic planning steering committee in the coming weeks. Ultimately, goals and action plans will be redefined and shared with the staff for further input in March. Our next meeting of the larger committee is scheduled in April. However, the steering committee, a committee of about 12, will be meeting at the end of January to review revisions to the district's mission, vision, and shared values based on the input from the larger committee. And this will be followed by a session with the co-chairs of each of the 5 committees and the steering committee in February. That ends my report on strategic planning. The next item that I have is the 2016 school calendar. I just want the board to know that 2016-17 school calendar will be presented to the board in February at its regularly scheduled meeting. I will finalize the administrative recommendation and share it with the association in advance of your consideration of that schedule. Lastly, on school consolidation, I stated at meetings in late 2015 that the next update on school consolidation will be provided in January 2016. There is a consolidation item on the agenda under old business this evening where the board will discuss the matter. And that ends my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Zerby. Thank you, Dr. Zerby. Now we will take public comment on all the board action items. Is there any public comment?
John Andrews, Lower Providence. With regard to the list of bills, on the December list on page 6, there's an item with a vendor's name of HEISS, H-E-I-S-S, Gibbons and Company, unemployment compensation for 2013 and 2014 for $18,000. And I think unemployment compensation normally goes to individuals, so it's not clear to me why there's a Heiss-Gibbons company here, and also why it's for work done in 2013, and now we're in 2016. On the next page, page 7, there's an item for the Shining Knights Limited for a chess class in the fall for about $5,000. And I'm curious as to what grade, how many students, and what does it tie into in the academic program. I remember my father teaching me to play chess in like first grade or second grade, and I didn't get any chess instruction in school. On the January bill list, an item that I questioned before without getting an answer, there's an outfit called Educational Alternatives for ABA, and their K-12 services for the month of November were approximately $100,000. And I'm wondering whether that's a charter school where the kids are given instruction on campus or off campus. I'm just befuddled at these monthly bills of $100,000, and as I mentioned at a prior meeting, no answer was provided. On the activity fund list for December, there's an item where the vendor is F period, C period, D period, and under description it says portion amount due. It's only for $630, but I think that F period, C period, D period presumably has a name, and the description should be for some service rendered, whether it's cleaning blackboards or snow shoveling or whatever. But you don't just send out a bill to someone and then say amount due without any explanation. On the treasurer's report, there's a Methacton has setting aside something like $117,000 for refurbishing the turf fields in approximately 10 years. And the income in that fund currently is a 0.1% annual rate. And I'm thinking that the goal should be, if the warranty on the fields expires in 8 years, that you ought to be able to find a bond that would satisfy the authorities and have an interest rate of, I would say, at least 3%. Perhaps you could buy some of the bonds that Methacton is using to refinance. And then on the Treasury's report also, there's an officials account, and I don't know who the officials are. I don't know the definition of that, but a month or two ago, it was overdrawn, so I wonder whether some checks bounced or what's going on there. I presume it was it's money spent for good purpose, but I don't see any of the other accounts being overdrawn. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. I want to make sure we get you answers to your questions, and I certainly do not have answers to all those questions, so if you know how to email to me, so just send me an email for any questions you want answered, and we'll get
You have them sent to me.
or have them sent to Dr. Zerbe, since he volunteered.
You would just pass them along to me anyhow, so I would rather get them than I could get them I get them distributed to get the
At least I would say I don't know the answers to these.
Understood.
Any other public comments? Okay, thank you. Oh. I was expecting you, I just didn't see your hand.
Candy Olival, Eagleville. Since you're apparently going to vote on the board meetings tonight when you're going to set your dates, I have to say, I agree with Mr. Roth 100% about having a work session. I spent a lot of years sitting in work sessions in the school district, and a lot of information is given out at work sessions, and it has been discussed before it gets to the following week to vote on. And you can work out the kinks. I've seen items taken off the following week's agenda and tabled, and items put on because it was discussed at the work session. When Mr. Roth mentioned about the VOTEC school and needing machinists, Methacton hasn't been really in the forefront of advocating the VOTEC school and really pushing the VOTEC school. I remember one year when Dr. Quinn was still here, we had a work session and they did a big program on how every child should go to college. Not every child should, and we've been fed this over the years. You'll hear a lot. Yes, every child should have the opportunity. A lot of kids just aren't in college. We need our students to know there is other things out there in the world. We need people to do auto body work, fix our cars, our washers, our dryers, machinists. And I hear a lot of adults say, well, who do I call to get it fixed? And unfortunately, these are starting to get to be dying jobs. And a lot of these jobs pay very well. And the school district should be in the forefront of advocating the VOTEC school and putting it out there to the students, say, hey, look, you don't want to go, we offer these. And I've seen a lot of other school districts really don't prop up their VOTEC school. And, I mean, you can get floral services at the VOTEC school, you get your hair done. These are things that the residents should patronize. I know they've placed a couple years at the Pennsylvania Farm Show for their floral arrangements and gotten ribbons. And I think, we need to, there's a lot to discuss in your work sessions. And I mean, your finance committee, I know a number of school districts, their finance committee is the whole board. I think because you're voting on how to spend money and take care of the district, the whole board should be present. You don't audio tape the committee meetings, you don't videotape the committee meetings, and that information shouldn't be passed on to the other members secondhand. That's the most important thing in the school district is the finances. So it should be the whole board. I don't think those committee meetings should be put into the work sessions, because I've seen work sessions get very long. When we went to one board meeting a month, was here till 11:30 at night, where they sent the students home at 10, and because there was so much information crammed into the agenda. And I think it would be beneficial for the board to have an extra date to sit and discuss items and matters and work out the kinks, and then when it comes to the following week to vote, you have a pretty good idea, and then the public can also engage you instead of doing on the night you vote. So I'm not one to try to step backwards, but in this case, going back to the work sessions like we always had, I think would be beneficial for the board and for the public. So I would really consider that. That's one of the things I think should have never been changed here. So I think you'll really take that under advisement.
I appreciate all your comments. And if you do attend that first February 16th work session, I would really like to hear your feedback given your long history with the school district. So let us know what we did wrong or did right, and I'm sure you'll point out what we did wrong too, okay? Thank you. Mr. Pelicano.
Good evening, everybody. Greg Pelicano, Eagleville. As it relates to the February board meeting and your discussion around the school calendar, could you please elaborate at that why we can or cannot build in snow days into the schedule? Thank you. Thank you.
I think it's important that the discussion, once I bring the calendar to the board in February, we certainly can have that discussion. And currently, it's been brought to my attention that there's been some chatter about that particular matter, and unfortunately, or actually fortunately, we hadn't had to use any days up until just recently. We have 2 days built into the schedule, and they typically center around the Easter holiday area, and typically the first 2 days that we would use would be the first 2 days that are on the schedule for a vacation around that, called that Easter or spring break. And then the days following will be tacked on to the end of the school year. That's how the current calendar exists, and that's how we will operate under that particular schedule. But certainly, the board can have the discussion if they feel that there's some need for other changes to the calendar that I present in February.
I'd also add to that, I think it's worthwhile to look at creating some more flexibility in our schedule for things like that. Mr. Pelicano asked the question I asked earlier today, so I think it's on everybody's minds. I know when we set days as days off as families, we kind of etch those in stone and plan around them, and so when we take away those days, it does create some disruption. So I think right now we've inherited a system and a process that is in place, but we'll look to how we can create some flexibility and bake that in, because there's a lot of factors that go into those decisions, and probably even including some contractual agreements and all that. But we'll look to see how we create that flexibility, because I don't like giving up my kids' vacation any more than anybody else, honestly. So we'll address that. Yes, sir. Wow. Sorry.
Sorry. Suzanne Andrews, Lower Providence. I want to second Ms. Auerbach's suggestion about the calendar when you think about having the board as a whole the board works as a committee of the whole. Just do away with all of these separate subcommittees. You've got at the point, what do you have, 8 or 10 subcommittees, and everybody has at least a committee, and some people have 3 or 4, and it is burdensome. And if they're really interested in finance, maybe you could have a separate finance subcommittee, but other than that, it seems to me that you could rethink this whole concept that's been going on forever about everybody having subcommittees and then having one meeting. Instead, just the board is a committee of the whole. You come together, say like the third Tuesday of the month, that's your working meeting. You go over maybe items that are coming up on the agenda, but you also then would deliberate on some of the other things you don't otherwise have time to do on your regular meetings. And then the fourth meeting would be your voting meeting. You could have some other meetings that if you want to talk about your budget and so forth, but the board, I think, could act as a committee of the whole. Everybody is informed on all of the topics that you're supposed to be working on. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Joe Orson, Lower Providence. I'm not clear on how the working sessions would dovetail into the committee meetings. I feel like you're going to be just at the committee meeting, you're going to be discussing things, and then you're going to be with the committee members, and then in the next hour you're going to be rediscussing those same things with the larger group. Could you just clarify that a little bit so I understand when to show up?
Sure. The idea behind bringing the full board to the committee meeting is the committee will run a portion of the meeting, and then there will be certain topics that they will bring to the broader group in the working session that need to be worked on to get more detail. It's not 100% clear yet, I agree, and that's why we're going to try it out with the February Finance Committee and hopefully get feedback from all those attend and try to refine the process and make it more efficient. So I totally agree that it's not 100% clear yet, and we're hoping to fine-tune it a little bit more with the February meeting.
For scheduling, I think it would be easier for members of the community, and I don't know how it'll work for you, and I do agree that there's probably some kind of trial and iterative process to kind of get it streamlined, but I'd rather be able to show up one time to be at the working sessions than to show up at the Finance Committee and what was it, the Education?
The Education Committee.
Yeah. So, my 2 cents. Thank you.
All right, thank you for sharing. Ms. Smith, are you coming down? All right.
Hi, Amy Smith from Worcester. I have a question about busing. I know things are probably different since we're contracted out with First Student now. If the kids are in school and we need to dismiss early because of weather, or, I'll say weather, what time would they get picked up? Is there something in our contract that says we can dictate what time school ends, or do we have to work within certain restraints? So, if it's 10 o'clock and the principal makes the call you make the call and the principals know that we're going to dismiss, they're going to feed the kids and then leave, can we get do you have the control to say the kids are going to get out by such and such time, or are we limited in our constraints of when we can pick up the kids and do all those logistics?
Yeah, primarily, I generate my decision based on what the predictions are from the weather forecasters. So if we're in school, and there could be instances where we have buses drop students off in the morning, and we almost have to make a decision that quick. So, but there's other times when we have the opportunity to feed them and then to get them onto the road and get them home safely prior to a weather event. So typically it's a matter of assessing the situation with all of from our busing company's information, from our talking with our township leaders as well, and we try to work together to assess that decision. But primarily what we do, once I make a decision, we communicate in many fashions through different social media as well as through our email and calling system to parents, let them know exactly when the dismissal times will occur and when the children would typically arrive home. So, for example, if we were dismissing at, say, 1 o'clock, typically a dismissal time for, say, the elementary school is at 3:25. We know that it would typically take 20 minutes for your child to get home on a regular day. It would likely take about the same, possibly even more or less, depending on whether we're in the weather or not while we're dismissing. So to give you an idea, we publish those times of when the dismissals will occur, and parents can typically expect that the delivery of those children will be at approximately the time following in their normal schedule. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question is, are there constraints put on you because the buses are contracted as opposed to in-house with making that decision of making a call of when the kids will get picked up?
No, the decision, to make that, the parameters of making that decision are similar to when we had the buses. And that means that we need to make a decision and give drivers enough notice to return from home to work. That typically could be, if I recall what our procedure is, it's typically about 45 minutes to an hour. And then from there, we can start the actual dismissal procedure with drivers. So the general constraints that I have always had will continue to be those constraints that I have today.
Okay. So there's no change in
There's
how
no
that's
change.
done? Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other public comment?
On the agenda.
Yeah.
On the board action items? Thank you. Let's move on to the board meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the board meeting minutes of the December 1st, 2015 and December 7th, 2015 meetings?
You have a motion?
Motion and second. Second. Any other comments from the boards? Okay. Can I vote then? All those in favor, thank you.
Aye.
All those against? Abstain? Okay. Thank you. Now let's move on to the motion is approved by a vote of 8 to 1.
If there's a vote against, you should.
Okay. And we, per the suggestion of the solicitor, just point out that Mr. Phillips was the one vote against. Let's move on to the fiscal items. Mr. Whiteleather.
Thank you. I have 3 items on for your consideration this evening. Your first item is a monthly list of bills as reviewed and approved by our Finance Committee at their January 19th meeting. And as we're looking towards the list of bills, we had, because of the early December board meeting, we had actually 2 months of bills, 2 months of Treasurer's report, as well as 2 months of financial analysis that were reviewed at the Finance Committee meeting. As well, you have Treasurer's report, again, for 2 months, reflecting the months of December and January, on for your approval this evening, again, as reviewed by our Finance Committee. Lastly, is your vote here this evening for the 2016-17 proposed, or the preliminary budget. It wasn't a proposed state prior, hopefully, to your vote here this evening. Just to take a moment to go over a couple of the items as we would look towards your vote this evening. We had a number of meetings that have occurred from basically the starting point, which was our initial draft review at our December 7th board meeting / reorganization meeting. During that meeting, the board did direct administration to proceed with preparing the budget as well as seeking the exceptions for potential tax purposes leading down to the final budget. We had a Finance Committee meeting on December 19th where we had reviewed what is called the PDE 2028. That is the official budget document that is prepared in accordance with the state guidelines and Act 1. That document was reviewed in detail with Finance Committee to go over all the components that make up that particular document, as well as answering any questions that came forth during that time. What you have before you is our preliminary budget. Basically represents first formalized step in the budget preparation process for next year. As Mr. Ryan had spoken about earlier, we have a number of items that still have yet to vet out as we look towards coming to a final budget. Some of those items obviously are impactful to us. Our PSERS increase, very significant increase for next year to the tune of $2 million on our expense side, $1 million hopefully net back from the state. So that one item alone is $1 million increase to us. Obviously, we do not have a state budget for the 15-16 budget, and we're preparing a budget for next year, again, without any state budget guidance. We obviously have a number of issues that are still outstanding. Bond refunding is yet one of many that we would continue discussion on, as well as how that reflects on our expenditures and revenues looking forward. So with that in mind, what you have before you is the first formalized action on behalf of the board relative to the Act 1 calendar. The deadline to approve a budget is January 27th. So this evening would be a recommendation for your approval of the preliminary budget, as well as, again, directing administration to seek the exceptions with the Department of Education for any potential tax increase that may be necessary, which would be in excess of our Act 1 index of 2.4%. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whiteletter. Would anyone like to take any of these items separately?
I would. Budget one, please.
Okay. Anyone else? All right. Why don't we address the budget one first, and then we'll vote on the second, on the other two. So may I have a motion to approve the 2006-2007 preliminary budget as presented?
What's the increase on that budget?
Expenditure or tax increase?
What's the tax increase? Tax increase.
The tax increase in the preliminary budget right now is approximately 6.74%.
We should do the motion first and then have the question period, the comments by the board.
Well, I just want everybody to know it's a 6.74% increase. Everybody's going to make the motion in second.
Okay. May I have a motion to approve the 2016-2017 preliminary budget as presented? Do I have a second? Second. Any comments from the board now?
Yes. First of all, on all budget-related matters, I would appreciate the tax increase percentage be put in the agenda and listed on the public agenda, please, for the public. I also believe that a 6.74% increase is outlandish. I will never support a budget like that. I'm all going on record on that. I believe that I know there's more moving targets, and I know there's more things to do. However, it has been my opinion, as always, and I'll state it again, that the administration has has due diligence to trim the budget as much as possible, and we work within our means, and that's what I mean. And I don't believe that a budget like this, I've never come across a budget like this, and I don't believe it should even be at this table, but it is here. Thank you.
Well, I'll speak in the same vein as Mr. Roth. We have fewer students this year, and yet the increase is proposed at this point to be significant. I know that this is not going to be the final budget, but I believe we're starting at a point that is just not something that I could accept.
I don't, speaking for myself, I realize that this is a very preliminary budget. We're going through the process of meeting the requirement to possibly use the Act 1. I don't think anybody is advocating a 6.7% increase without going through the math and making the decisions based on what we can choose to do or not. And I don't think that the process is around a posturing around just numbers. We need to get our hands around what these numbers mean, what the cuts would mean, what we're choosing to do. And I think the process of adding the working sessions is so that everybody participates in those decisions and are making their choices based on known facts and not based on raw percentages of like or not like.
Oh, I was going to comment, but Paul pretty much said everything that I wanted to say and then some, and said it better than I probably could have, so that's it.
While I realize this is a preliminary budget, back in December, I wasn't in favor of going beyond the index, still not in favor, and have to concur with Ms. Hackett and Mr. Roth that coming in with the first pass at 6.74% is something that we really should have worked harder at this preliminary stage to get it closer to where it is. We know there's some savings coming forward. We talked about them in committee, and I'm not sure why they would not have been reflected at this stage, at least in the initial baseline, at least an estimate of costs. Any budget that I ever did that we knew we had savings that were inherent, we would at least bake in a fair estimate of what those savings would be. And that's not reflected in here.
If I may comment? Sure. I think it's important for the board to know that while the administration appreciates your statements and your comments and certainly your concern for the item before you this evening, 6.74% is a great deal of tax increase, which by law, would require us to, go to a referendum or some other, extraordinary means. So I just want the board to understand that, and the public to understand that, it's certainly not a result of a lot of additional work that occurred from the December 7th meeting, where we presented this preliminary budget and the work that we've done since that time. But I can tell you that while we have been working to reduce this, we also know that the direction was to advertise a budget, which we did, and under the Act 1 guidelines to present the budget for the one that we advertised for your approval this evening. And while it doesn't necessarily sit well, based on some of the comments that I hear, it is more of a process than it is an ends. And so we need to certainly do work as an administrative team, as well as a member of the Finance Committee and the board as a whole. But I just want you to know that it is what it is, because this is what we said we were advertising in December. And so while we believe that we provided some, as Mr. Dorn mentioned, provided some input at the last Finance Committee meeting where we can possibly gain some savings, there's still a lot more work that we need to do. And I just want you to know that. And like budgets before, we will continue to be diligent in our work.
I'd just like to comment a little bit off of what Mr. Winters said and some of what Dr. Zerbe said. Just for public knowledge, since Mr. Phillips brought up what's important for the public to know, the Finance Committee is 4 members currently, myself, Mr. Winters, Ms. Hackett, and Mr. Dorn. All 4 members of the Finance Committee agreed to move this forward as is, so it was a unanimous decision at the Finance meeting. Second of all, 6.74, as Dr. Zerbe said, we know that that's not going to happen. We are not going to be able to get the community behind a 6.74% tax increase, because that will have to go to referendum and that will have to be voted on. And as is happened in the past, the closer we get to the finalized budget, the more that number will come down, and we will strive our best to get that number as low as possible. Not stopping at just the exceptions, not stopping at just the index, as low as we can, without, and I want to stress this, without sacrificing the education of our students. Too often, and I'll go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but too often we will vote against the budget because it shows a tax increase. But whenever the board is presented with spending more money, there's unanimous votes yes. As Mr. Winters had said, we need to make a decision here whether we're just going to grandstand for 0% tax increases, or if we're going to make educated decisions. If we want to go for a 0%, I encourage all board members, not just the ones on the Finance Committee, to come to the committee and give us your proposals on what those cuts will look like, because that's what we're looking for right now. If we say 0%, that's a long ways to get to 0%, and our children are going to suffer from it. And personally, speaking for myself, I will not vote for a budget which shows sacrificing our children's education. And third, just as a matter of logistics, we had to vote for this tonight. The board had agreed to vote for the Act 1 plus exceptions. Okay, so in order for that to work, we needed 30 days from the time that we presented it to the public, and the budget needed to show an increase of more than the Act 1 index, which this budget does. Thank you.
I think there's a point of clarification that needs to be made, and I don't believe it's grandstanding, but I think that when we were at Finance Committee, we approved to put the budget forward, and we were told there was no choice because we have to file. So it was put forward, or agreed to put it forward to the committee so we could have discussion. That's the whole point of it. Okay? So we need to make sure we're on record with the correct facts. We agreed to put the budget forward to the board so we could have discussion.
The budget forward in its current manner at that date.
And as we were told at that session by Stewart and Dr. Zerbe, we had no choice because there's a deadline that needs to be met. I think this all goes back to the root back in December when we agreed to go to the 2.4 plus the exceptions. Okay, that gave the administration the reason not to tighten down the belt at this stage in the game and start looking at things much harder. So we took the belt, we loosened the belt, and they took it. And now we have a lot more work to try to get a budget in line that satisfies the public as far as the numbers and what they can afford in tax increases.
I think what we voted for in December, Scott, was to make sure that we had all our options on the table related to Harrisburg and not knowing how to get there and not knowing what it meant to get there. That is what we voted for. We did not vote for a tax increase. We voted for keeping our options open. The body language says, I did vote for a tax increase. I did not vote for a tax increase. I voted for the possibility that we could use a tax increase above the index. That's what we voted for in December.
Certain members of the board voted for this budget in December, and you're right, it was not to approve a tax increase. But my concern is that for the last 3 years, this district has generated a surplus. And anytime it generates a surplus, it's based on taxes that have been received that were not needed to be received. And when we know that we are burdening the taxpayers and we are not performing our fiduciary responsibility of keeping the budget to be at a level that makes sense, then we're not doing our job. And the fact of the matter is, by approving a budget at this level, is to let the administration feel that they have a better free rein for what the final budget is going to be. I know it's not going to be anywhere near this. I tried to get it to be a little bit lower last time when we talked about it at the December meeting, but this is what was presented. So I am just not in favor of it at this point.
Just to comment on that, Brenda, I think the board will take, the superintendent and Stuart will take the direction from the board on what to do. Having the option at this particular point in time has not set us up for May or June on what we're doing from a budget perspective. So I want to be transparent with the community and at least get on the record with the rest of the board, is what we're doing here is making sure we're making the right choices, nothing more than that at this point. We may end up voting, I may end up voting for a tax increase, and then you could say, we see back in January, Paul said, I don't care. What we're trying to do is make the right choice based on knowing all the facts. Right now, we don't know all the facts. And the posturing that it's something other than that is not helping the process.
I will just say, from what I'm hearing from both sides of this issue, is some people would have liked some of the cuts to be done prior to today, because that number of 6.74 makes everybody panic. I think what the other side might be saying is we need to be transparent and show what 6.74 looks like and what 2.4 looks like, or what 0% increase looks like, and then there's a lot of questions. So I think that this is creating a panic. I think people want to say, I don't like that number, I don't like that number, which I understand. But we are trying to add transparency to this process, and I think the public needs to know what 6.74 looks like and what a lower number looks like. Because I have asked all along, did anyone analyze any of these cuts that have been made? And although it's a lot of work to do between now and May, that's what we're trying to do, if I'm understanding this correctly.
Any other comments?
Sure. Well, 2 election cycles that I've gone through, I campaigned on holding the line on taxes. Other people that campaigned with me hold the line on taxes. And, you know, they ended up raising taxes. I never voted for a tax increase. Looking back at the campaign literature that was out there saying that Republican-controlled 34 years of tax increases. So I'm just trying to figure out the flyer where they criticizing the board that they did a 0% increase and they should have increased taxes, or were they trying to posture that therefore not increasing taxes? So the last board voted not to take the exceptions, to have the administration prepare a 2.4 as a preliminary. That was changed. Now we're at 6.74. You would have got to see a look at what 2.4% would have looked like by what the administration would have had to do to accomplish that. I tried at that meeting to get the board to have the administration to show us a 0% increase in what that would look like and what the superintendent and the administration would have recommended for cuts to accomplish that, and then work from there. But once again, we're working from 6.74%. We're going to work backwards, which doesn't make any sense. You start at 0%, you see what's going to be cut, And then you go and you say, well, we can't afford to cut that because it affects this or that. But if this is all we're going to do is just keep increasing taxes, when we all campaigned, everybody at this table has campaigned that hold the line on taxes. We're not going to raise taxes. They raised them for 34 years. And then we get up here, and then now it's going to be in the paper, 6.74%. And that's the first vote that you guys made as a preliminary budget. Now, if someone wants to amend this motion to make it within a 2.4% and see what Dave's going to have to do to make that happen between now and May, or we can amend it to have a zero tax increase so he can show us what it would take to get to zero and see what we can stomach in getting there. And we might end up at 3%, but at least we would have did our due diligence for the residents, the taxpayers of this district, that we actually looked to see what a zero tax increase looked like. So that's the responsibility as us as board members, is to do the right thing for the taxpayers. Taxpayers aren't out there saying, raise our taxes, raise our taxes. I mean, God, you look at the newspaper, watch the news, everybody's tired of taxes. And we're going to work backwards into it? It's nuts. I mean, it's just a waste of time. Because you're going to say 2.4 and then you're going to say, wow, we're going to have to cut that. Well, Dave, now what would 0% look like? Or do you not go past 2.4? But this is just a pathetic exercise. I mean, even the way the state has it set up, I'd rather them say, look, prepare a zero tax increase, list all the things that you'll have to cut, and then they'll tell us the parameters and what we can and can't cut and what they'll allow us to raise the taxes to. But working this way into a budget, I'd love to see how someone runs their household. If you make $100,000 a year and you have another $5,000 a year in expenses in your household, what do? You go to your boss and say, I need another $5,000 a year? The boss is going to say, take a hike. So the reality here is the taxpayers are telling us to take a hike. That's why we all got elected, because we said we were going to hold the line on taxes.
A point of clarification. As part of our campaigning, we did not say that we would hold the line at taxes, and we did not say that we would never raise taxes. At least I can personally attest to that. One of the points that did come up was that taxes did go up 33 times in 34 years, but in that time we saw programs being cut repeatedly and educational outcomes diminishing, and that was a concern.
So what you're saying, that's smoke and mirrors. Smoke and mirrors will make the appearance that we're for not raising taxes by criticizing 34 years of tax increases. Come on, I'll bring the flyer in.
I'm sorry. This is not a campaign. We don't want to waste the people's time bickering. We've all tried. Sorry. We don't want to waste anybody's time bickering. You bring up, Mr. Phillips, some very good points about how to do a budget. And you bring up very good points about that. I respect that. I think what has happened is due to errors in the past or limited transparency, that is what brought us to this point. And I really don't want to talk about political campaigns, because if that's the case, excuse me, and then let's let it go.
I'd like to
I wouldn't be allowed to be sitting here because many people didn't want a teacher.
And I'd
When
like
you
to
go
rein
to
this
school
back
board-
into the motion that's
First
at
off,
hand.
it's not bickering, it's what I observe, okay? Now, if you want to sit here, and it is political up here, whether you like it or not, it's a process in which we arrived at this desk, okay? And people put things out there, and the public perceives, whatever it may be, when we put literature out there, and based on the literature, it didn't look like you guys were saying, hey, we're going to provide education at any cost. That wasn't the message. The message was that you were going to watch the taxes because the previous boards raised it for 34 years. Now, here, that's fine. Go with your 6.74% tonight.
Let me just reiterate, it was raised taxes, and what do we have to show for it? Okay? Let's move past political campaign. And you're not politics, political campaign. And sorry, Mr. Boardman, go ahead.
Folks, can we speak to the motion that's before the board and not to political
Okay,
campaigns?
so
or-
we'll go back to the person that made the motion. Do they want to amend the motion to at least take it back to the 2.4% within the index instead of 6.74%?
I have a question. Then if, in order to do that, if I'm understanding this correctly, that would mean that Dr. Zerbe and Mr. Waitleather would have to come up with a preliminary budget showing that 2.4% by tomorrow? Am I correct in that understanding?
I apologize. I was talking to the board president about this conversation.
Do you want me to repeat my question?
Yeah, that would probably be appropriate.
Okay, so what I'm understanding is that because we have to vote on a preliminary budget by tomorrow, if we're going to take these Act 1 exceptions, which we've already voted that we would apply for them, if we wanted to amend this budget to be anything other than that, you would have to do it by tomorrow? I'm trying to get my head around exactly what the outcome would be if we didn't vote on this tonight.
What I would recommend is that the approval of the motion in front of the board this evening has to be approved or not approved as it's worded. If the board then wants to provide additional direction for the administration, for me and the administration on preparing future looks at the budget, they can do that with a second motion that will then, give us that direction. So two separate motions is my recommendation, so that the first one complies with the Act 1 regulation, allows us to continue the process without me getting fined. And that's not funny. No, not really. And then the second one would be to give us the direction that we certainly should have. And then some of your discussion is appropriate. Others, as Board President was trying to bring everybody back, is for other matters, not necessarily the concern of the administration, but maybe a concern of yours. And however you want to discuss that, you shall do that. But that's what I would recommend. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Just make a recommendation. If somebody wants to make a motion about going to something other than what is on the proposal, they're welcome to make that motion. We can vote on both. I think everybody's sort of spoke their piece. I think we should just move on and vote on it.
Excuse me, I would like to make one more comment. It is about taxes, but it is also about education. I am not interested in having low taxes and not good education. That is not where I am. I believe that we can just use a sharp pencil to get to where we need to get.
So let's go back to the motion at hand. And I agree with Mrs. Hackett. Whenever I talk to her, she says every kid is important to me. And I think everybody on the board also feels that all the kids in all the schools, and as well as our community, are important to us. And that's why we ran and wanted to be on the board, is to try to help with both those. So I would suggest that we do, because we're in the Act 1 cycle now, we go ahead with the vote on the motion, and then if we want to consider further guidance to the administration, we can do that as well. So we had the comment. Now let's have the vote for this motion. Thank you. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4. And I vote in favor, so it goes down as 5-4.
I would like to say, since it's not unanimous, you have to record who voted in which direction.
Thank you.
Roll call vote if you want.
So why don't we roll call vote it then? Okay.
Just go down the table.
Ms. Larson-Neese?
Yes.
Ms. Hackett?
No.
Yes.
Mr. Ryan, yes?
No.
Yes.
No. No.
And yes. Okay, thank you. Now, in terms of providing the...
5 yes, 4 no, no
Five.
passes.
The motion is approved with 5 yeses and 4 nos. Now, with the idea of providing additional guidance to the administration, while I think a 0% tax increase is, to quote Mr. Pelicano when he was on the board, is a noble idea, given our fixed increases, and might be quite a bit of a challenge. If somebody would like to consider a motion to provide additional guidance to the board at this time, or to the administration at this time, we can entertain that.
So if I make a motion, does the public get an opportunity to speak before the vote or before a motion? Since it's not on the agenda.
Before we make this motion, I think we should have a discussion amongst us to see where everybody stands and what, for instance, some may think that a 0% is acceptable, some may think a 2% is acceptable, regardless of what it means, or a 3%. So, and also the level of education. Everybody agrees we're not here to hurt education, but what are we judging that on? Or what's wrong with our education now? Like, what are the issues that we're having, and is money going to fix it? Everybody loves to say we don't want to hurt the kids. We want to have a good school. So you're saying we have a bad school now. Okay, so you're saying we don't have a bad school.
I'm saying that I wouldn't want to put taxes ahead of the quality education we have.
I don't think anybody does.
Okay, but
then show me where the education is a problem and let's fix it. But don't sit there and just say, hey, I don't want to put taxes ahead of the student's education. I mean, that's not solving anything. That's not showing a problem. But, for instance, yes, Mr. Pelicano might have said, hey, it's a noble idea of a 0%. But if you're not willing to have the guts to take a look at it, then you should at least take a look at it and see what has to be done and identify where the problems are within the district.
In order to run the meeting appropriately, what I would suggest is, given that we just voted on that and passed that, we give the guidance to the administration to come back in the next budget with very sharpened pencils and explain to us what the options are, and we'll move on to the next items.
Okay, what are they going to show us? What guidance are we giving the administration to come back to? I mean, we're the board, and we set the goals. So are we asking them to identify the problems with our school? And are we also asking them what it's going to take to fix it? And are we also going to tell them where we want to be in the budget so they can work towards that, instead of doing a 6.74% and then having us go back and forth 100 times and finally coming up with an arbitrary number to raise the taxes by. So what are we going to tell the administration to work on to show us?
Excuse me, Mr. President, as a note of order, the item on the agenda was passed. I have yet to hear a motion made by any individual nor seconded. I believe that this discussion is being completely done in the wrong aspect. I am new to this, but I am pretty sure that until a motion is made and seconded, this discussion is meaningless. Thank you.
You can think it's meaningless all you want, but it's going to get discussed this meeting at some point. So whether you want to talk about it now or towards the end of the meeting, but we're on.
Would you like to make a motion?
First off, I'll make a motion at the end of the meeting if you'd like. Okay, I'm going to ask if the administration wants to come for a budget, to work on something for us for next meeting, we better have some kind of guidance for them. And the president could sit here and he can formulate that by a discussion here and then recommend something to the administration or to Dr. Zerbe.
I would like to make a motion.
Thank you.
I would like to make a motion that the board direct the administration to come up with a budget that falls below the Act 1 index by the February 16th Finance Committee / work session meeting. The reason for that is so then we can discuss it, and then we can then go see where we're at with that budget, and then you start to kind of, it's not what I like to do. I'd like to start at a zero-based budget, but that's not going to happen with this board. So I'm figuring that would be the easiest thing to do to get the motion on the table and voted on. And if nobody likes it, they'll vote it down. If they like it, they vote it up. Okay?
I second the motion.
And I want to make that clear, below the Act 1 index, not at Act 1, below Act 1.
2.3?
2.399999999. Whatever it is. And you have to understand, this is to get this thing moving, okay?
Okay. Do we have any more discussion around that motion?
Official wording of the motion.
Let me ask a question. If that motion is asking for something at index or below, it doesn't throw away the other. It's just two options. You're just asking to speed this along and have something more sharpened by February 16th.
Correct.
Any more comment from the board? Since this item...
I just asked Stuart and Dr. Zerbe is the time frame to do that something that could be done.
I think that I appreciate your question and your consideration, but I think that with all due respect, let us give it our best shot and try to meet that. And if we're able to, we'll have that. If we're not able to at that moment in time, we'll have what we have, and we'll at least be able to present our position on it. But we'll certainly be clear about where we are at that time on the 16th.
That sort of sounds like the motion was a recommendation as opposed to a motion. You're not committing that you are going to respond to the motion as the motion is stated.
Okay. We will have a budget under 2.4% for your consideration at the committee meeting.
Yeah, if it's approved, and since this is something we're going to vote on now, we need to allow public comment on it.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I think we hear talk from the business office of the budget activity being a year-round exercise that starts in earnest in September, and now we're in the last week in January. So I think, the board here ought to approve this motion because the time is, the clock is ticking, and the dialogue here clearly indicates that the board wants to be responsive to the taxpayers, and the taxpayers are in a flat economy. Just this was either Friday or yesterday that the national CPI for the year 2015 was 0.7%. The teacher's contract that we're in now has a salary impact of about 3% in the next year. And when that contract was accepted roughly 3 years ago, presumably the people making the decision didn't anticipate that the Great Recession in this area would still be with us. So, one of the issues is dialogue with the MEA relative to some kind of a salary freeze for next year. That's the kind of a thing that would get you from 6.7 down by a bunch. Dr. Zerbe gave a presentation earlier in this meeting on the high school scheduling consulting concept with basically with the output delivered I think in December of this year. Also, there was a PDF relative to the District Management Council that was attached to both the Finance Committee meeting agenda last week and the agenda for this meeting, where they gave as an example a high school with 130 teachers, and through the efforts of the District Management Council, they were able to reduce that staff by about 20. Well, some years ago, I reviewed the high school staffing under a perfect scheduling scenario that recommended that there'd be no change in programs with perfect scheduling that could be done not with 135 teachers, which we had that year, but with about 20 less. And I think since 2010, we've had a constant number of teachers in the high school. Yet I think the number is 135 on the roster. We still are proposing in this budget 135 apparently, and the number of students is down from 1,800 to 1,600. That begs for the administration to defend that, and I don't think it's clear that over that time period that the quality of the test scores has gone up by anything commensurate. At this instant, I can't say whether it's flat up or down, but I would recommend that any visiting of how the scheduling is done have some emphasis so that it's done this year to affect the teaching staff for the fall. Thank you.
Joe Orson, Lower Providence. First, I want to express how thankful I am that both sides of the issue are being robustly discussed at this meeting. I think it's something that we've, as a public, have been hungry for, and whether you agree with both one side or the other, just be thankful that we're actually having an open discussion about this most important issue. Secondly, my notes are kind of scrambled, so bear with me. There was a talk of 33 out of 34 years of budget increases. To me, that just means that if you ran, or let's take that out of it, if you didn't want to have a budget increase those 34 years but ended up doing so, that tells me how unrealistic a 0% tax increase is. Especially given the constraints that we're facing with not the unknowing what's happening in Harrisburg, et cetera. Whether we like it or not, this is our reality. And it seems to me that the 0% increase we had last year, and granted, I don't have the most in-depth knowledge of the budgeting process, but the 0% increase last year seems to me kind of like a campaign ploy, where election year ploy, where it was achieved, but it wasn't looking out for the future. If we had a surplus that we could have relied upon with just a modest increase, I think that would go a long way into helping us. And as far as the 6% budget, I think that we would need several different scenarios of different increases in taxes so that we can see what the give and take is at different levels of any kind of tax increase. It's not like we're just going to run one scenario and like it or not. There's going to be things that can change, one thing taken out and other things left in, and there's going to be different scenarios that are going to have to be analyzed. But just saying that, no, we're not going to do something and taking options off the table does not seem like the appropriate thing for me to do. Let's see. I think my other notes have to be reserved until the end of the meeting. So thank you. And again, I cannot tell you how thankful I am, even though I don't disagree with what everyone's saying, that we're actually having a two-sided discussion. I am so thankful for that.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Josh Kamenetz, Audubon. And I know the clock is ticking, as Mr. Andrews said, and as some of you have said, you've got a 10 o'clock Cinderella deadline. So I'll try and be brief. One of the things that I'd like to see, in addition to having a percentage of tax increase presented, is what does that actually mean in terms of dollars and cents? So according to the website, the example on the website with our current millage and our current tax assessments, the 6.7% number is about $300 or $400 per family, per household, right? So what I'd like to see, what we're really dickering about, is the difference between 2.5%, 2.399%. Let's call it 4.8%, because you have to remember that last year's wasn't free. It just got deferred to this year, right? Last year's 0. So I'd also like to see the proposal, what's just been proposed, amended to include what does 4.8% look like, because that's really what's fair, is to carry over last year's, and then 6.7. And let's sharpen our pencils. Nobody wants to pay more than they have to, but let's remember that we're talking about a couple $100 per family, and I think my family gives that in tissues and Purell every year on the first week of school. So if this will help defray some of those costs, I think it's worth it. For folks that really is a hardship, there's a lot of hardship programs in place with the state, and the state's been dragging their feet, but they're pretty good about accepting, hardship cases for the elderly and folks that can't take on any kind of an increase like that. So let's think about this holistically, and let's remember this is preliminary and that the final budget isn't due until May. So
thank you.
Hi, P.T. Piano, Audubon, and I think the last speaker mentioned a couple things that was on my mind. My 2 cents, the clock is ticking, but it's only January. We still have February, March, April, May. I think asking the administration in 3 weeks to go from 6.79 down to 2.399 is a little unreasonable, given the fact that Harrisburg is still in limbo. So I would encourage you not to vote for any motion at this point, but just look and see the incremental decreases that the business office can bring back next month and the month after that. And if it's not getting tapered down, maybe you do have to, bring up a more direction at that time. But I think right now to bring it down this rapidly in 3 weeks, I think we have time. We have to also monitor Harrisburg. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Diana Kernop, and I'm co-president of the Teachers Association. My family's been in this district since 1956, and they're still here. My mother still owns property here. I've been teaching here since 1977. Methacton is not a district that has ever given away the store, no matter what area it's in. They've taken the board has done their due diligence, and they have been fiscally responsible, and they have been austere. And it doesn't matter what number you're starting out with now, whether it's a new board came on and they wanted a cushion so that they could understand the budget process and give themselves a window. Everybody sitting here knows you're never going to go to that number. And you will cut what you need to cut to get the number down. We always do. You don't want to sacrifice education, and I respect that. But at least have a dialogue that is going to let you, as a new group, see what it is you're going to cut before you have the district bring you a list of cuts and then have the public here saying, I don't want that cut. Ultimately, you're going to face that too if the cuts go back down to zero. Because the bottom line is it's going to be people and it's going to be programs, because you don't have much more to outsource at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Candy Oliver, Eagleville. I've sat in this room for many years and heard discussion about the budgets. I've heard people say we've had tax increases for 33, 34 years. It's a moot point because the boards raised our taxes when times were good and they were flush with money and no one complained. Then we fell into a recession, and contrary to popular belief, we are still in a recession in this area. Median income has dropped from minus 10% to 0% for Lower Providence, 0% to 9% in Worcester. People are, regardless of what we think, are hurting in this school district. I understand you want the best education for your children. I wanted it for mine. Taxes don't come before education. Taxes and education go hand in hand. But you can't have education without taxpayers. You need to look. You have the parents here want the best education for the children. I have no problem with that. But the majority of your taxpayers do have nothing in this school district. They're paying for everyone's children to go to school. They've paid for mine. I'm paying for people. That's fine. You need to take them into consideration. They are senior citizens. They are disabled. They're retired. And they thought, they wouldn't have to lose their home. We lose homes every month in this school district to sheriff sales. I haven't seen the sheriff sales lately in the Times Herald. We used to put them in every month. We average 7th month. These are things you need to take into consideration. And honestly, I'm still trying to find out what the major cuts were the last couple of years in this school district. Because every time something was cut, you turned around and spent money. You give with one hand and you take with the other. Something's got to give. Because people are going to start saying uncle. And that means people without children in the school district, people with children in the school district. I don't want to see anybody lose their home here. I don't want to see their children lose their education here. I think the kids should get an education here. I wanted my kids in this school district, not in Norristown or PV, here. And they got a very good education. And I don't want to see anybody hurt. I don't envy you. This is a really, really sore subject every year it comes up. And the state's not helping. But you need to, put the state here, and say, how can we do this without their check? Because right now, they're coming up with another budget. They didn't do last year's, they're going to be coming up with a new one, so I don't know what they're doing, but you have to be fiscally responsible to the taxpayers. That at one time was in the policy, that the board's first duty was to be fiscally responsible to the taxpayers, and it was removed from the policy a couple years back. That's your first responsibility. Then to the students. To the students. But I've seen the school district, I've seen the pie chart on the wall, and the ones that get left in the dust is the students. Because they get the crumbs of the money that's left for salaries and benefits, debt service, legal fees. This is what you need to, the kids need to come first. And we need to get back to where we were. But you also, it's a really tough balancing act. And you got to look at how many families are you going to lose if you raise taxes. I mean, I know 6.74% sounds scary. I think 7.78 sounds scarier in Norristown. But you need to bring it down, because if the public sees this, they're going to be grabbing their chests tomorrow when they look at this video. And a lot of people don't understand how budgets work. Maybe in their home, but when it comes to a district, but when they hear this, it scares them. I mean, it worries me. I mean, my husband's family's been here a very long time. His family paid a lot of taxes in the school district. And he worries now that we cannot financially stay in this district anymore. And I agree with him. I want to stay here. I figured I'd stay here forever. But I want what's best for the taxpayers and what's best for the students. And that's a tough balancing act, and I don't envy you, but you need to really look hard at how it's going to affect everyone in the school district. And then see how the dust will settle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Andrew Sander, Lower Providence. You know, I agree with a lot of the comments that were made by a lot of the people about the budgeting and what has happened. However, there's a little bit of a lack of credibility with some of the folks that are turning this into more of a political thing than saying, hey, listen, guys, what did the administration give you? Why didn't we get this? There are two people that voted to bring this forth today, and they said that, well, the only reason why we brought it forth, at least the one gentleman, Mr. Dorn, said, was so that we can discuss it. But he knew that there was a deadline of getting this thing voted tonight. So he voted to bring this out of Finance Committee forward. But then when it came time to vote for it, he voted against it. And that just doesn't make sense. Mrs. Hackett did the same thing. It doesn't make sense. So the credibility gets lost. And Mr. Phillips, you're telling me why I voted. I didn't vote because people were going to give me a 0% tax increase. I'm not sure if that's what everyone else here did, but they have their minds to make up for themselves, not you. The voters voted. I voted because I wanted fiscal sanity, not just 0% taxes increases. I didn't want people spending excess money on fields and then budgeting money to do even more with the fields. All right, but I do agree that you do need to charge the administration with, you know, coming in at 0%, coming in at 2.4%, and coming in at what you think would not hurt education. And tell us what in 0% and what in 2.4% are the cuts that we have to make. And that's something the administration, quite frankly, should be doing every day. I was a financial person. I had to do that every day. I was in a publicly run company. I was second in charge in private equity. I had to know every day what my cash flow was, every day what my positions were, and every day what I could or could not cut. So for us to sit here and say that they're going to be able to go from 6.7% to 2.4% in 2 weeks seems kind of ludicrous to me. However, I do agree the charge should be made. I don't know that it should be by 2 weeks, because I don't think you're going to get something to value. If you want something to value, give them a month or some amount of time that they can work on it. But it's something that needs to be done more consistently, and you really can't wait till this time every year to have it done. I know there's a lot of new board members, but you can't wait till this time of year and say, oh, there was a snowstorm, so I couldn't do my homework. It doesn't work. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll take a vote on this now? I think.
Just read back the motion.
The motion being to hold the administration to provide a 2.4%.
Want me to read it?
Will you please read?
Okay, the motion is for us to vote on is to have the budget presented to the board by the administration under index by the February 16th finance/work session meeting. That is my motion.
All right, let's vote on this now. What is the line I always forget? All those in favor? Thank you. I think we're going to have a split vote, so let's just do a roll call vote.
No.
Kim Ari Lashonese, no. Ms.
Yes.
Tackett?
I'm going to vote yes, but if Dr. Zerbe does not, just to say that if Dr. Zerbe doesn't make it by February, I don't see that as being a problem. I think the principle of having all the options in front of us is fine. I think putting a 3-week deadline is ludicrous, but I vote yes.
Mr. I?
I too vote yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
And I vote yes as well, but I think we need to be sensitive to that 3-week time frame around this. I think the spirit of this is really what everybody would like.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, sure.
My understanding from Stuart and Dr. Zerbe is they have been working on this budget since September, so this is not new stuff.
Okay.
And since they've been working on it since September, and initially were working on a 2.4% cap, they must have a general idea how to get there already, because that's what it was the direction prior to the December meeting. So, while I understand that it's work, my guess is it's dusting some things off that were already in motion.
All right. Sure.
I think the principle of looking forward beyond what we have not seen in the Finance Committee last week was a preliminary yet for the next coming years related to contractual requirements, PISA requirements, and until we see that, we don't see the entire picture. So to be asking for this in a shortened period when we haven't seen it yet, and the previous board had not seen it, I think is where the time constraint doesn't make sense, but just a comment.
Are we opening up comments for everybody?
Well, we already voted on it. Yeah, it's done. It's done. Let's move on. All right, we finally got that one off the table.
You have to go back to list of bills.
Yeah, now we're going to take the other two, the list of bills and the treasurer's report. I'd like to make a motion to approve the list of bills and the treasurer's report. Motion, second, Mr. Phillips. Any comments from the board? Oh, that's nice, good. I'm impressed this board didn't have comments about something. So, all those in favor? It's unanimous.
A unanimous vote.
All right, let's get this moving along here, folks. Personnel items, Mr. Harney.
Yes, we have one employment professional this evening. It's a replacement position. I do want to amend, it should say Arcola and high school, if you'd understand that as a split position. So that's Arcola and the high school for that replacement position. We have one employment classified this evening. We have one long-term substitute classified for your approval this evening. We have 4 uncompensated leave professional this evening. We have 1 sabbatical for your approval this evening. We have 13 supplemental contracts for your approval this evening. We're adding 5 additions to our classified substitute list with your approval. And we have the approved list of volunteers. And we have 1 hire in our community education field. We've got Kendall Byers Lifeguard Community Education Swim Program. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Harney. Would anyone like to take any of these items separately?
Could I just ask one question to
Sure.
determine that? The item under sabbatical leave, is that paid or unpaid?
All sabbaticals are paid at half salary.
Okay. All right, thank you. May I have a motion to approve the personnel items as presented? Mr. Phillips, Mr. Ross, second. Any comments from the board?
Just one quick question. How are, under the supplemental contracts and then the attachment with the spring season coaches, how are the coaches' salaries determined? Just as a matter of education.
We have a formula that encompasses experience, levels of experience, years of experience, and we have a fixed point number. It's $83 per point. That's a multiplier with our years of experience multiplier. There's several other pieces to it, so it's a formula that's based. So the 2 people applying for the same position may not get the exact amount depending on the year's experience in that position.
And that's for the assistant coaches as well?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, all those in favor of? It passes unanimously. Motion is approved by a vote of 9-0. Okay, we don't have anything under curriculum and programs. Is that correct? Dr. Catone is not here, so we don't have anything. So we'll move along to policy and Dr. Zerbe.
There are no items for the board's consideration this evening under policy.
And under other, Dr. Zerbe?
Under other, there are 5 items listed under gifts and donations. The accept a gift of $500 from an anonymous donor for Skyview Upper Elementary School. Accept a gift of $2,226.08 from the student fundraising for Spring 16 mural at Arrowhead Elementary School. Accept a gift of $100. Accept a gift of $500 and accept another gift of $500 as listed here on the agenda under gifts and donations. And then, in addition to under other, we have the high school scheduling, authorize the administration to engage the district management council as presented this evening, effective February 1 through January 30th at the cost not to exceed $20,000. And lastly, 2016 meeting dates. Likely, we've gotten the direction as earlier in the board meeting, so we would remove that item from consideration.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. Would anybody like to take any of these separately now that we removed the 2016 meeting dates? Yes.
Just a question regarding one, so I can do the same thing that Brenda did. In terms of the high school scheduling, when that was first presented to the Finance Committee, it was anticipated that it could go over 1 year. Is that now off the table?
That is not off the table. What you're authorizing here this evening is for the 1-year agreement, okay? If it does need to extend longer than the 1 year, then we will be back asking for your authorization to go and proceed further. We would likely do that prior to the end of this agreement, but we're only asking for 1 year at this point.
Thank you. I have one additional question as it relates to the scheduling process. I would really like to encourage you to wrap it up earlier in December so that any considerations that might impact the budget could be taken into account earlier rather than later.
Good point. Any other comments? Yeah, so may I have a motion to approve the gifts and donations and the high school scheduling? Ms. Tackett, second. Mr. Winters. We already, I think, went through most of the comments. Any other comments? Okay. All those in favor? Unanimous, 9-0. So the motion is approved by a vote of 9-0. Dates of the board member, for the board members' calendar. Upcoming dates, February 1st for the Policy Committee, February 8th for the Property Committee, February 16th for the Finance Committee, and February 23rd for the additional board meeting. Dr. Zerbe.
And there'll be an Education Committee meeting in there as well. We just need to get the date finalized, and then we'll advertise all of these together.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to old business. At the last board meeting, we mentioned that we'd be talking about the school consolidation process at this meeting, and earlier in the year, Dr. Zerbe had mentioned that there would be an update at the January meeting, and also Dr. Zerbe put out a communication to make sure people are aware of that. This has been throughout the last year, a big topic of discussion. There's a lot of factors that have been playing into this, and when you look at our school district near term, we've seen the decrease in enrollment, and that's been brought up, and we continue to monitor that and try to really figure out where things are going long term. We also have close to a year's worth of work into this project that we have 6 new board members that are also not only getting up to speed on the day-to-day operations, as you can see as I fumble through a few of the things here at running the board meeting, but just in getting ourselves acclimated to the whole day-to-day operation process across all the important committees and all the important decisions that need to be made. When you look at that, and you also look at the breadth of experience that the 6 new board members bring to the table, there's a lot of factors going into understanding what to do with the excess space in our schools, understanding what to do with the imbalance of class size down at our elementary schools, and understand whether we truly feel that the trends in terms of declining enrollment are going to continue into the future, or is there some inflection point that they're going to start to rise, and how much they would potentially rise. So when we look at all this, and we look at all the other work that's going on in the school district today, like the strategic committees, and that's embracing the community, and a lot of people in this room here today, as I look out, I see a lot of people that are involved in those committees that are going to come back to us with hopefully a lot of very informed and very good recommendations that we can consider. What I want to do is I would like to have a motion to continue collecting information regarding the school closing or school consolidation, or really just what are we going to do long term with our school district, and to take off the table for 2016-2017 school term any consideration of any school closings, because we need a longer, thoughtful process that brings the new school board members, which is the majority of the school board now, up to speed on what has been done in the past, what is going on in the daily operations, and where do we go into the future. So we've left it out there that there's potential school closing, with talk about Audubon in the past related to the upcoming school year. And I'd like to have a motion, or accept a motion, to take a school closing off the school year for 2016-2017. And
one question, Chris.
Yeah.
Being that there's 6 new board members looking at it, are we opening up, going back and looking at it the way we looked at it when we were considering whether it was Arrowhead and Audubon? Are we going to look at both of those schools and go back through this and and look at the whole picture, not just one particular corner of the district?
I would like a holistic view. So if you asked me today, Jim, to explain what has transpired over the last year, I could not give you a detailed review of that. I could not, in an educated way, speak to that other than simple little bullet points that I know. So I think it's in our best interest to get the new members up to speed in terms of what's been done today, and then I would like to see it taken from a new perspective. And it's not just focused on Audubon, it's not just focused on Arrowhead, it's focused on taking all these things into account, what's best for the long-term health of our school district. So if it involves a school closing, then the community is going to be involved in that decision, and we won't have people showing up with the, why my school t-shirts, because we've worked together to understand if it's rearranging, redistricting our elementary schools to get the balance back into the schools at elementary level, that's on the table too. So from my perspective, everything's on the table going forward. I just want us to make an educated decision that we can agree on, that the community has some input into, and also takes into account all the good things that are going on with with strategic planning committees and all the others.
I understand where you're coming from, and I agree. I think you have 6 members that are new. I think it's a fresh look. I think all the options should be open. I was going to bring this under new business, but for instance, our work session, I think it's something that you take, for instance, the budget, education, 2 separate entities within our district, and start with, being that we're in the budget cycle right now, look at the budget and understand where our major expenses are, where the administration will end up cutting from, and figure out what our board's goals are going to be to give the administration the direction. In the same time, as far as the education end, as far as looking at how the schools are utilized, I know back when we were looking at whether it was going to be Audubon or Arrowhead, we weren't hearing from the educators that was going to be a bad thing, okay? And that's something that, hey,
please,
you know what? It's what we were told. So that's something that we have to look at and discuss. Where the money's going to come from, identify the problems that we have in education, how we're going to fix them. Money's not necessarily going to fix it. Maybe it's how we utilize things, how we look at our teachers, how they're being handled. But I think our work sessions bring that in a manner that it's a very one-item thing, and just working on that, and so everybody has an understanding and the same page as a goal for the board, and set those goals up where we want to be. That would help greatly in deciding whether or not, how far we want to go with closing the school or not closing it.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Reese, I did see you raise your hand, right?
That was for the motion.
For the motion, and then we kind of got on a tangent. I apologize. Do I have a second for the motion?
Oh, she made the motion.
She did. She beat you to it, I'm sorry to say. Okay, sorry. Do we have a second for it? A second. We already had some public comment or board comment from Mr. Fox.
Discussion too. I just want to clarify too. So basically what this motion is to say that the board is not going to make any decision on closing schools. However, the work on school consolidation will continue or not?
Yes.
It will continue?
Yes.
Okay. And then to go along with some of Jim's points, having some of this stuff in the board's goals would be very, very helpful in understanding where we need to shoot for. Especially, I just don't want to see all the work that we've done on this and the thousands and thousands of dollars that were spent. Not to mention all the community input and community hours just be off to the wayside. I don't mind just taking another look in a different perspective. I think that's a healthy thing to do. But I believe that the district has some issues that we need to really look at and has some challenges. With the school utilization, we have capacity issues. We have, it's been documented, but I think still looking at it a different way is fine. I just don't want to see all the work that's gone through, just be put off aside. So I want to keep this on, make sure it's on the front burners, and that we're still seeing some progress and made on as we go along.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to continue the work. We just need to figure out timing and priorities around the additional work. Part of it is, getting the 6 board members up to speed on what's been worked today, and I know Dr. Zerbe's working on bringing some information together for us to really kind of educate us on the whole history of this. Yes.
Chris, the Dr. Zerbe had developed some committees that were supposed to report back at a certain point in time in the fall. I would like to see that as part of the starting point, to see where those committees are and where that process is, and have the committees report back in some way, either preferably, in my opinion, directly or via Dr. Zerbe.
Sure. I think part of that was going to be captured in the historical information you're bringing together, but if there's more information that those committees should share with us, then that's a very good point to have that finalized. So, any more comment? Yes.
Several comments. Maybe a question to you at this point. You're automatically assuming that the new board isn't going to be able to understand this process anytime soon, which is why you're suggesting a delay of a year. Dr. Zerbe, do you have information on what dates are required for continuing the process at this point? I know we were constrained by having to have certain timeframes so that it can be helpful to understand how this process can go forward.
Certainly in anticipation of this conversation, I had a conversation earlier this evening with our solicitor, and I'd like, if Mr. Bartle, if you could weigh in on the timeline, because by state law, it does determine, how a process will unfold. And while we did share that with the public about a year ago, you just want to get refreshed of what that schedule might look like.
From where we are now,
From what
are our timelines that we have to address?
Sure.
Yeah, there are a couple of sections of the school code that are related to this. Thank you. A couple of sections of the school code that are related to this particular question. As you'll recall, one of the things we did was to provide 15 days notice, advance notice of the hearing to consider the school closings. So we had a legal advertisement in the newspaper 15 days prior to the meeting that we had that kicked off the process last year. At the end of the hearings, and I think we had 2 last year, obviously it depends on how many people would come and comment, but when you're finished that hearing, the law then requires a 3-month period before the board makes any decision with respect to whether to close a school or not. On the back end of this thing, we also have to give at least 60 days. The closing should be more than 60 days after the date of the board decision. The effective date of the closing should be more than 60 days after that date, and we have to provide 60 days notice to the affected employees. If you put all those requirements together, you're talking about a 6-month window. Take the day that you would propose to open school and count back about 6 months, and that's pretty much your deadline, because it comes down to about 5 months. But when you then figure in that just because one provision ends one day doesn't mean that your board meeting then immediately is the next day, you're probably going to be about 6 months, and that PSBA recommends a 6-month window from the day you begin the process until the close of the school before the school year begins. And if you have less than that 6 months, then they recommend that you move it to the next year. So it's roughly 6 months from that date.
Okay, but at this point in the process, are we anywhere within that 6-month period?
Well, I guess I would look and count from the beginning of the year and say January, February, March, April, May, June, and then that would leave you July and August. So you could probably start March 1st? Would that be right? March, April, May, June, July, and August. If you should start not less than March 1st with the process, and that may be you're probably a few weeks ahead or a couple of weeks ahead of where you need to be. You don't need to make this decision right now. Actually, you don't need to make this decision at all, because if you're not going to close a school, the decision becomes made for you after a certain point in time. But if you want to give this notice to the public at this time, you should give it to them either at this meeting or probably be cutting a little bit close, but the next meeting. You're probably right within that 1 month period that you would give the notice. Once you get within 6 months, you've already given them the notice. You can't physically get it done within that time frame.
I thought when we discussed timelines last year and we voted to not make a decision at a certain point in the spring,
Right.
that we were continuing the process and that the decision could be made at any point after that without going back through the horrible process of having to make such announcements and stuff that was painful to so many people. I thought that at this point we were within the process if an action would be taken on Audubon School.
And actually, Brenda, that's true. We already have had the public hearing with respect to that matter, and we've had the cooling off period. So we're probably, if you were to try and close for September of 2016, I'm not suggesting anybody's saying that, but if you're probably a lot closer because you have accomplished most of these things already.
Again, those items, as Mr. Bartle has shared, are in regards to the law. So there may be some other things that we need to consider as part of the process. So in terms of doing it for this school year, it makes it's that much more difficult if, in fact, the board at one time was considering a second enrollment study. And they've heard me say that in addition to the second enrollment study, there would likely be a need for a study on the redistribution of students, the sending areas of the elementary schools. And really, until those two pieces of information are available and in our hands and properly discussed, it isn't until that time that we could actually, in my opinion, make any recommendation for a closure or consolidation. It's been stated by me that while our declining enrollment based on the study we have is evident, and the facts are in the last 2 years, we see that decline in our actual enrollment. We also know that there's a space available in our district buildings, but until we marry that information with an actual redistribution of those students to lesser than the existing number of buildings, we won't know if we can really, do something of this magnitude. So the time frame, if you recall some of the presentations on getting a second study and possibly getting a redistricting plan, were anywhere from 4 to 6 months, if I recall correctly. Based on different vendors' perceptions and views of that nature. So I think that information might be helpful in what you're asking for.
Right. Well, so my concern is that we have several issues that sort of interplay with all of this. We've had conversations about a budget And we have had reports that we would save $1 million if we closed a school, $1 million a year, which is a piece. We have uneven distribution within schools, where some children are in classes in the teens, and some children are in classes of 25 in the same grade levels. Some of that could be cured by realigning attendance boundaries and not closing a school. It's, to my way of thinking, it's unfair to the children who are in the very large classrooms to continue to keep them there simply because we as a board are not able to do the work that needs to be done in the timely manner that it needs to be done. I also think that to delay considering this causes us to think about the possibility of doing something for those children who are in those very large classrooms by realigning attendance boundaries, and then subsequently finding that we're in a position where we have to close a school. And that would disrupt the children twice if some of them were realigned from one school to another and then a school ultimately was closed. I think it's not fair for us to coddle ourselves, if you will, to take the time prior to being able to make an effective decision that we have the responsibility to make.
Go ahead, Paul, you can go first.
Brenda, that's the first time I heard a number around the actual closing of the school, and I think that was some of the principle of the school consolidation discussion was that it was not around a financial issue. So it could potentially provide some financial benefits, but I think from a process perspective, I need more time to understand it. And I think what Chris is suggesting here is that we have some more time to chew on it and understand it, because we have not been behind the scenes and knowing those details. And I do not want to be making those type of decisions on a cram basis.
Brenda, I agree with what you're saying, that delaying things, there is imbalance. There needs to be something done on a district-wide level. But the part of the problem was some of this discussion that just went on now hasn't gone on. So although you seemed aware of that there's a law and that there's guidelines, there wasn't a process to do this that was fair to the community and the children as well. And I'm not being critical. What I'm saying is, you're right, that delaying this does cause class size to be larger in some buildings and smaller in others. And there's probably a host of other issues. But the way that the process was done only allows the people up at this table to know all these ins and outs, the people that were here before. So I think you're right, that we have one more year of some inequality, but I hate to say it, it's because the process was rushed and slightly, I don't want to say inaccurate, I can't think of the right word, but other districts have done it where it was more open, and that we would know some of this information if it was shared, because many of us were just the public before.
Dave, would you be able to tell the board and the public any details where, what kind of feelings you got from the school principals that this, as far as, would this be good for the district? Would this be bad for the district? Would it be, what was the consensus of the school principals?
Well, I think to answer your question, Mr. Phillips, the process required many members of my administration to look at the information, not only the the enrollment information, but also the capacity information. And it included multiple discussions, not only with them, but also with the consultant that we were working with. We presented, and I made a recommendation based on the information that I had before me, which included conversations with the administration, which included conversations and look at the information that I had. And I made an appropriate recommendation based on that information. I think in hindsight, we could probably look back and say the process, we could have done a couple things better. No secret on that. But I think what the board president is suggesting is that this is not an item to take off the table. It's an item that needs further discussion. It likely is going to still need some type of confirmation of the long-term projections and the faith by the community as well as members of the board in those projections, because any dramatic change is going to be based on the data that's available to us. And I think you folks need faith in that. And I think while we were going through the process, there was enough skepticism at some point to kind of just put the brakes on and say, let's just wait. And I think that was probably best displayed back in October when I brought forth a recommendation for a vendor for the second report. So, regardless of whether I or the administration feel that, it's an educationally sound process, our decision-making, involves what's in the best interest of our students first. Once we overcame that particular conversation, we had no objection to moving forward with the matter. But again, that's based on whether or not we have confidence as a community in the data that we have. And I think that's kind of the holding point at where we need to kind of refocus and have a conversation maybe as a board about where we take those next steps and how soon we take those next steps. And if it's to the liking of the board, I mean, maybe a draft of what a timeline might look like from my perspective might be the next appropriate step. If, for example, you were to, pass a motion this evening to, take the closing of a school or a consolidation process off the table for the 16-17 school year.
My question as far as what the principals had to say, I didn't really hear what I thought I heard a while ago from the principal as far as the amount of students being, it's very, I'm trying to think back to what was the message to the board was from the school principals. And it was a very valid point that they made, and it was something about, it's easier to handle 20 to 25 kids versus 12 or 14 in the classroom and the testing. I sort of remember a bunch of principals.
They have 20 to 25.
I think what's important while you're trying to recollect what we discussed through this whole entire process, I think it's rather important to allow me the opportunity to put together the binders that includes all the information, and for us to deliver that as a board, to the board as a whole, so that we're all on the same page with the matter. But we've said a lot of things that we believed in and that we stood behind. The problem is, I think, again, while I made recommendations, the skepticism to some of the data was really the big holding point and kind of put the dampers on the process moving forward. So until we overcome that with a new process, a new perspective, and possibly a new look at the data, maybe even having a second opinion, if that's the process that the board wants to undertake. I think it's a moot point to what we said before.
And just to be clear on what I'm suggesting taking a school closing off for the next year, because I don't think we are equipped to make that decision the next few months. It's not to stop the entire consolidation process, not to stop looking at it, having discussions about it, and trying to make the best long-term decision.
So this is just informing the public that it's off the table for this year, closing it, but the process is continuing along.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I think the bottom line here is that I was present at a lot of the public hearings and the meetings that went on last year about school consolidation. And I have a stack of papers at home that I amassed in that time and a lot of information. And I see over there that Dr. Zerbe has a binder in front of him that says school consolidation. And my stack of papers is nowhere near that size. I don't know that I could comfortably get myself familiar with that much data in the next couple of months to make a decision in time for the 16-17 school year. And I think that's what we're voting on here.
I don't believe that the board even entertained that idea of closing the school in the 16-17 year. I don't think we even came up with an idea.
Well, I think even if we did or we didn't, I think we're...
Excuse me.
I think what
I
we
don't
need to do
believe-
is make it clear to the public that it's official. We have taken it off the table for 16-17.
I am a fear that if you take this off the table, nothing will get done. That's what I'm saying. And something needs to get done, whether you like it or not, because there are issues, and we have to, you can't shutter yourself away from things that are happening in this school district. You have declining enrollment. You have excess capacity. We got to talk about it, okay? And you got to make sure that the work is still being done. And I never even committed to closing any school at all. As me, my own, me. Okay? So by you saying that and putting that out there, I don't think it's necessary. I think what you need to do is come up with a list of, again, going to the goals, the board goals, which we have yet to establish, and say, look, these are the goals regarding school consolidation. This is what we want to do this year. Boom, 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 boom. Yes, I know we have 6 new board members, and yes, there's a ton of information to digest, but if memory serves correctly, a lot of these board members were at a lot of the meetings and hearings that we had, so you got to jump on it, okay? But some of the things that we have to talk about have to be done in public, transparency, right? Have to be done through meetings, and there's going to be lots more of those to go, all right? But I mean, to officially say that you're going to not close the school, well, that's all fine and well, but guess what? We're not even anywhere near that, making a decision anywhere near that yet. So I don't see the point of even making this, are you actually having a vote, a motion to do this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that means you have to open up to public comment too, right? Okay.
And Mr. Roth, I respect what you're saying, I really do, but I think what you have to understand is, I know you had not committed to close a school, but the public, and I say that because I was part of the public until 2 months ago, did not have a lot of information. The only information, that we had very limited information. And I stood up here way before public hearings in a tracksuit, I remember being mortified, excuse me, saying, I'm not opposed to closing a school if you give me all the information. So I think what Mr. Boardman is trying to say is respecting that, and I know you know things, you don't know what secret things, that's not what I'm suggesting, but you know some things that many of us do not know, and I think what the motion is saying is, we're going to continue down the road of figuring out how to fix the problem, not close our eyes, but gives the public, the community, the students, the teachers, a chance to breathe, and for us to not start the process over, but to do it properly with what you've done. Because I agree, don't waste the time, don't waste the money, but we've heard from a lot of public, but we didn't hear from anybody at this table. Now, maybe there's reasons for that. I'm not criticizing it. And
So this is my point exactly. what I'm understanding, what the president wants to do is table the entire school consolidation.
No, just to let everybody know, breathe, we're not closing it next year, because even though you know that that's not going to happen,
Then
the
I would
community does.
I would like to table this motion until the next board meeting, till we get a list of what we want, what goals we want to do in the next year, okay? And obviously, one of those goals is not going to be close a school, come on. But let's get an idea of what you want to do. What we want to do, we want to reevaluate, get new numbers on, challenge the Pell numbers, okay, number one. Look at the excess capacity, get the new board members up to date, okay? I would rather than do that than have a vote on something that is meaningless, quite frankly, to me, because they're nowhere even anywhere near that.
I see where Herb's coming from in the sense that, here's the first meeting that all of us have been here. We're talking about the budget, we're talking about a lot of different things. First time we're getting a feel for the way our board meeting goes. I would suggest just table until next meeting and have the budget talks, get some information as a board member about this. I don't think, I'm not in favor of closing it this year. And it's going to take a time, but telling the public today, telling them next month, as long as it's before the end of the year, letting them know that it's not going to happen or it's going to happen. I think just do your due diligence. You have 5 members that will follow along that won't close it this year. But I don't think it's to the point where you have to make a motion and at this point. I think there's some animosity here amongst people that worked very hard, whether they're on a committee in the public, whether they're a board member. They just, their look at this as, okay, this is the first step of just totally stopping the process and it's never going to happen. So I'd just say this is one of those things, table until next meeting, talk amongst ourselves with Dave, and then come back to it, and we could do it next month also.
If I could make a comment. I think that the board needs to understand, at least from my perspective in operating the district, why this decision is important. I need to get the direction. By delaying a decision or by not giving me direction about the potential closure or not, causes some problems with kindergarten registration, where our teachers are going to be. We need to be. I'm trying to be thoughtful of the process. So here's the example. If you believe this evening that there's a possibility to squeeze a decision in and get a redistricting plan together and get a second report on enrollment before I guess it would possibly March or even May, then you should not vote for this. So you think we can get that done and get it done properly. But if you think that that's going to take 4 to 6 months in some instances, as some of the vendors had suggested, I think we're beyond the timeline of getting it logically done. And so then by delaying it, even though you've made very good arguments here this evening, everyone has, my problem is I need to run the district. I need to be prepared for September of next year. By delaying it, I have to push back some of the stuff that we'll be doing for kindergarten registration. We don't want to be in the position where our new parents coming to the district aren't knowing where their children are going to go. And that just sends a bad message. And while this conversation is difficult, we don't want to parlay that difficult message into a bad message when we don't need to. Because I don't think we can technically get it done if we believe we need a second enrollment report and we need to do redistricting before a decision is made, because I believe both of those things need to be done. Although I must say that I do believe the Pell study was a good choice, but apparently I'm not the only one that needs to be confident in their decision. And so a second opinion might be the best thing that we do, and then a redistricting report would need to be done and vetted out, which likely would take several months. So those are my comments. I would just ask that the board considers this evening a motion to at least inform me so that I can inform my administration and we can inform our staff and our public about how school will operate for next year, because we don't wait till August to decide what we're going to do for September. And that's why some of this process by law is put in place, so that there's a thoughtful means not only to employees, but there's a thoughtful means for the public. So while it may not seem a whole lot difference between January and February, it does mean a big deal administratively for us, possibly having to put off a decision on kindergarten registration. And as you all know, the better we do with kindergarten registration, the better we're going to be long-term with enrollment. So,
one thing is certainty. People, the unknown, people can't stand, and they like certainty. And, okay, we're going to have certainty that we're not closing it for the next school season. So does that give them uncertainty that, are we going to close it the following year? I'd rather say, well, okay, we're going to close the school 17-18, and then it doesn't happen because we came through the studies and we found that we shouldn't close it. So what, if you want certainty, that's...
Well, the only certainty is, a time for another discussion. But what I'm asking for is the direction that I believe I need in order to prepare for the next school year and to prepare this community to accept this district.
Just so we're clear on what the motion is, and then we can continue the comments, is to continue collecting information and discussing matters regarding school closing and consolidation, and to inform the superintendent and the public that the closure of a school building will not occur in 2016-2017 school term. That's it. So we're going to go ahead with discussions around a second enrollment projection study. We're going to consider all those other things and keep those discussions and those processes going. We're just taking a school closure next school year off the table so he can administratively manage to that. Now, anybody else have comments?
Yeah, I do. I think obviously what Dr. Zerbe is asking for seems fair and reasonable given the number of people that are impacted by this. What I do think we need to do, though, is have you come to the next meeting with a timeline that lays out the process that we need to go through. Obviously, I think we need to get that second data study, and delaying that much more, whether we have our parameters right in the RFP or we need to tweak that, I think that's a matter of discussion that we need to have. But the data coming out of this will feed strategic planning, it'll feed our budgets, et cetera. So while I agree on the 16-17, I think pretty well it's, within 1 month, I don't think you could get where you needed to get to make that decision. So I think that's fair and reasonable to make that request. I do think that timeline will feed so many other activities that the board has to consider in the coming months. So I think it's critical that we ask for the next meeting to kind of lay out that timeline, lay out the processes, and what you need from the board in order to move those processes forward in a reasonable manner so that we can make some informed decisions.
Just chime in real quick. I'm going to agree with Scott there. It's kind of my suggestion as well. As long as we establish a new timeline so that everyone is comfortable that this topic is not off the table. This topic is going to continue. Let's develop that new timeline and figure out where we're going from here. I also would like to piggyback off of what you said, Dr. Zerbe, that it's either this week or next week is actually National School Choice Week. And we saw what happened leading into last year when people thought there's a possibility of one of our schools closing. We saw what happened to enrollment. I can speak personally to and have heard the stories of parents who intentionally didn't enroll in Audubon because they were afraid the school was going to close. Now, whether it closes down the road or not, they made that decision off of the information that was available to them at that time. And I do support this motion. I think it's important that we let the parents know who were in the district, the parents who are thinking about enrolling their kids in kindergarten, as well as for the administration, so that they can properly plan with enough time frame to know what they need for next year in terms of staffing and resources. Thank you.
Well, so should we amend the motion then, so that we are including in there that Dr. Zerbe will come to us next month with a revised timeline? Would that make everybody feel more comfortable?
Okay. Okay, so we'll amend it to say, to include a consolidation timeline be presented at the February school board meeting. Okay. All right, so we already had a motion and a second.
Public comment?
And now we need public.
Now, the only thing that's on the agenda is that you're going to have a discussion concerning school consolidation.
Right.
I don't have anything on there about notice of what the motion
Okay. Public comment? She stood up first, John.
Erica Spinski, Audubon. As a newly minted volunteer this evening, thank you guys for approving volunteers. I want to say, I lost track of who exactly said what, but someone said it doesn't matter tonight whether we approve this tonight or next month or the following month, whether we're going to table the discussion or approve it. It matters to the parents. Last year, I was one of those kindergarten parents, upcoming kindergarten parents, who didn't know where my child was going to go to school. And it took a long time before I found out that she was going to Audubon. And so it matters to me to find out tonight, not next month, not the month after, that next year my kids will continue to go to Audubon. And that goes a long way to our confidence, and our confidence doesn't just need to be in the numbers that are presenting. Our confidence needs to be in knowing that you guys have our backs as far as doing what's best for our students. And also in the transparency of knowing what's going on. So it matters to me, and I think it matters to the other parents who are here, to know tonight that you don't think you're going to close the schools tonight. So that's why this motion, whether it's a silly motion to pass because you all know you're not going to close the school in the next year, the motion matters to us because we know what you're going to do. It might not be a motion that really is going to change anything, but it still matters to us. So thank you for even considering it, because when I told my son I was coming to a board meeting, to a school meeting, I hate that he even knows that it's going on, because I hate that he has the anxiety over this. He's a second grader, my daughter's the kindergartner. He said to me, "Oh, please, Mom, don't let them close my school. I don't want them to do that." So anyway, thank you very much for considering this, and I want you to know that's why it's important to us, because it shows that you have our backs, and that's why. So thank you.
Thank you.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I'm on one of the consolidation committees, and back in September, we had a meeting, and one subject that came up was not, in addition to the capacity in the regular classrooms, a subject that came up was the capacity in the special education classrooms, and that was going to be worked involving Mr. Thompson. And so, you know, maybe Mr. Thompson has brought back his answers, and they can be shared. The other thing was that in October, as Dr. Zerbe said this evening, there was consideration for a second opinion relative to enrollment projections, and you know, I guess I'd like to, and I believe the process for that might evolve into sending area reviews whether or not a school is selected to be closed. You know, that is at least a 4-month process. So, you know, I would like to see the administration in February come forward with a motion to put that second opinion under contract, and I'm among those who favor the outfit in Connecticut that had a different approach than the other outfits that either accepted the Pell methodology or did their own things mimicking the Pell methodology. I think a second opinion should be done differently than a first opinion. So I support this motion, and further, I think it's an easy task for the board to get that second opinion underway and being worked while things such as the budget take our attention in the spring. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pellicano?
Greg Pellicano, Eagleville. I also support the motion. I think, Mr. Boardman, I think it's reasonable for the new board members to try and have some time to get up to speed. But I also think, as Mr. Dorn said, it's reasonable to set, reasonable timeframes and goals to get there. Having been privy to the data that the new board members haven't seen yet, if you start some of these other processes, like Mr. Andrews said in the second opinion, you'll be able to get up to speed. You're all bright people. It's not that complicated. I've seen all the data. You'll be able to get through it in a reasonable amount of time frame so that, even if the school isn't going to be able to close or decisions will be made till next year, maybe it's the following year, but you'll have plenty of time so that if that decision comes maybe early in the 17 school year, it gives you plenty of time, or gives the school plenty of time to make a decision around that. So the other thing I just would like to encourage as part of the open process in the dialogue is, Mr. Phillips, I was there when the principals spoke to us, and I agree with you, they were on board with it. I think Dr. Zerbe would be very helpful to have the principals, other administrators, and also discuss the issues and have all that talked about in an open forum so you can really understand where everybody's coming from. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jill Orson, Lower Providence. First, I'd like to say that I attended a lot of the meetings in the spring about this issue, and the information and the discussion I heard from the board tonight was more comment than I heard from the board members the entire process in the spring. There was absolutely no public discourse from the board to the public at that time. So it's no wonder that the new members of the board aren't up to speed, and to imply that they can't get up to speed in a certain amount of time window frame, or that they can't grasp it in a certain amount of time frame is kind of disingenuous and not true. The real issue is that there's a lack of credibility and trust by the public, and even if they could come up to speed and understand all of behind the scenes on the numbers, there really is not any public support or belief that the numbers are sound, and the public would like to have more information around that, additional studies, and further consideration. If I can be assured that my and everyone's child in the district's, in the elementary school's education is not going to be harmed by a closing of the school, that all students with IEPs are going to receive the same level of support and have the facilities required to do that, I would absolutely support closing a school, and then knowing that that money can then be used to advance other areas of education. It is not about the closing of the school that caused so much public discontent. It was the lack of insight into the process, the lack of credibility, the behind closed doors decision-making that seemed to be going on. So I absolutely support this decision-making, and I certainly welcome the board to take as much time as needed to get up to speed and to further along the process with the committees and the new studies and so forth. So thank you for the motion.
Thank you.
Hello, Andrew Sainer, Lower Providence. Once again, I'm on the same committee as Mr. Andrews, so I second all his comments regarding the committee and going forward, and I look forward to getting a schedule from Dr. Zerbe and moving forward. And something else, I wasn't actually going to bring it up, but it was brought up by both Mr. Phillips and a former board member who spoke here prior, is that the principals were on board with this closing. What you guys have to understand is the way the board, if it's perception or real or not, the perception of what the board was doing was they wanted to close the school. That was the perception, okay? And Your superintendent was taking that perception, and that was going into the schools. And you guys are the kings, and you told your general what you wanted to do. What do you think your principals are going to say? They're going to go along? Do they want to get fired or no? You can make your breath, it's fine. But that's the case. It's perception. It may not be real or not, but realize that was the perception. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ashley Wilkerson from Audubon. I'd just like to talk for a minute from the parent perspective, what this vote means to us, because it may seem symbolic to you, but it's more than symbolic for all of us. Many of you on the board spent the past year, just like the rest of us out here, looking for answers to questions about whether or not we could close a school. And our opposition to closing the school wasn't because we just wanted to keep it from happening at all costs. It was because we wanted to make sure that if it happened, we had the information to know that our kids were going to be okay. And if you vote that we're going to wait and not close the school next year so that we can get the right information, then we know that there is a real concerted effort to get the information and get it to the public. And that's important for two reasons. First, simplistically, there are a lot of us here who are home and school volunteers, and our meetings that are coming up in the next month or two, we're looking at how we're organizing for next year. And for the other schools, it's probably more of a matter of, well, if a school closes, are you still going to be here? For Audubon, all year, the thing hanging over our head has been, are we even going to exist next year? And it would just really be nice for the next few months to know that we're going to exist and we can plan for next year. The other thing that goes along with that is it would also really be nice to know once and for all what a realistic schedule looks like. So we had a time frame that had the decision made, what was it, in May, and then we had another time frame that there was going to be a vote in December. And we all knew that those weren't realistic time frames. And it would be great to have a realistic time frame so that we know definitively when we're going to vote, because we're going to have enough information by then. We're going to have chosen somebody to do a second opinion. We'll have the data, and we can definitively say we will have enough information on X date to vote, and vote either to redistrict, because at the very least we know we need to do that, or vote to close a school. And my request would be to, if it's possible, try to do that in the early half of the school year next year, because then it gives everybody time to really plan and make the last year at a school, if it closes, a really fantastic year for those kids. And it gives the rest of that school year for everybody, the teachers, the parents, the volunteers, to help transition those kids so that instead of feeling like we're transitioning them to something that could be awful, getting information about something that we know will work, transmitting that information in a way that is comprehensible to a small child and making it a positive experience instead of the really negative experience that we hear about from people who went through school closures like Audubon in years past. And this gives us the potential to make it a good thing for everybody no matter what happens. So it may not seem like a big deal, but voting just to know that we're going to have next year and take the time to get the right data is actually a really big deal for all of us.
Thank you. All right, let's vote on this.
Just like to make one comment. Audrey made a good point as far as knowing. And if we're going to work through this process and we're looking at the timeline, knowing in the beginning of the 2016-17 school year, letting them know whether it's going to close or not, is that something that's unreasonable to have accomplished by then? I mean, at least put it to bed by that point.
Hopefully we can answer that at the next board meeting with a reasonable timeline.
The timeline, okay, the timeline's going to start, we'll say today, but our decision on whether we have enough data to say whether we're going to close it, we're not going to close it, I would think that'd be best to have that in the beginning of the school year. That way people know going into, that's their last year there, or they're going to continue going there. I think instead of lingering along, I think the timeline should be direct. That's all.
I think everybody agrees coming to a decision on whatever we're going to do sooner than later makes sense for a multitude of reasons. Okay. All right, so we have the the motion before us, and to be clear that it's just an accept to continue to collect information, discuss matters regarding school closing and consolidation, and to inform the superintendent and the public that the closure of a school building will not occur in 2016-2017 school term, with the direction to provide a preliminary timeline on this process at the February school board meeting by the superintendent for us to review. All those in favor? I'm going to start over on this side. It's unanimous. Before we move on, I just wanted to echo some of the comments that are made by the public. I really appreciate all the candor and thought and opinions everybody's providing on the board and by the public. And, you know, I think that's the way we're going to come to the best decision. So once in a while it's going to get a little heated, but it's a lot better to have all these discussions and opinions out there so that we can make the best decision. So thank you, and thank you to the community too. All right, moving on to the new business, public access to committee and board meeting agendas.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had asked to have this item added to tonight's agenda, stemming from a conversation with myself and the superintendent in regards to the Finance Committee and making sure that the agenda was out there with the correct attachments and presentations that you would see on a monthly basis. In agreement that it shouldn't just be the Finance Committee, it should be all committees of the board, including the actual school board meetings. So I'd like to make a motion. Hopefully it does not turn into another hour or two long discussion. It should be very simple, but in the wording of, I would like to make a motion that all agendas for committee meetings and board meetings be made available to the public 72 hours in advance of the meeting, as opposed to the 24 hours which is used currently, inclusive of all relevant documents or presentations attached to said meeting agenda. That would be the exact wording of it. My hope here is that the more notice the public has, there will be more attendance at some of the committee meetings. I know we have a lot of attendance now at the board meetings, but I'd like to see the same type of attendance at the committee meetings. That's how we get the public input. It also helps for occasional glitches, as some of you may have noticed. You know, today's agenda was a little bit late coming in, and that's the day of. If you allow something like this to happen 72 hours in advance, if there is a glitch, you still have plenty of time to make whatever accommodations you need to get here and be part of, you know, the conversation as a school district. So I'd like to...
I'd like to amend your motion before you finish your motion.
Sure.
Can we video record them for broadcast? And then that way we can broadcast them down, you know, within a certain time after we had the meeting, that they would then be broadcasted on our cable access channel.
Committee meetings?
Yeah.
Let's look into it.
I would prefer that I gather some details on that, because that's going to not be at a for free basis.
So let's keep that out.
Okay, we'll keep it out, but I'd like to revisit that part of it.
I think that's...
I mean, even if someone got an iPhone and just sat there and videoed it and YouTube, that's fine, but at least...
I nominate Jim to do that. Committee meeting, Jim.
No, everybody
Selfie.
here probably has an iPhone, so...
Okay.
Well, we have
All right, so we'll table that, and Dr. Zerbe will look into that to see if that's financially feasible, I
So,
think.
go with his motion.
I think that... Okay.
Thank you, Jim.
May I have a motion for that? A second? Yes.
Just that, I just want to point out that it's a good thing to do. I appreciate doing it. I will vote for it. But I also want to warn everybody that the life of the school district sometimes presents unexpected additions and changes right up to the day before, or even the day of, I think. And so it's important for people to not expect that what they see 72 hours before is exactly what it's going to be.
Yeah, and a good example of
that's
that is
a
the
big worry.
personnel changes at the last minute are the most
Yes.
common ones.
Right.
But yeah, that's a very good point. So it'll be a preliminary agenda with all the relevant presentations, and that will be a living document that could change up to the last minute. That's a very good point. Okay, so all those in favor? Oh, public comment? Sit there, Greg, yeah.
Does that include all finance reports as well, projections and everything else?
Yeah.
I mean, you said all attachments, I just want to make sure it's clear.
Yeah.
That all finance reports, projections, everything that you would look at.
If they were the normal attachments, right?
Yeah, I would say that anything that is normally discussed at a monthly meeting in front of the public could be added to the agenda.
Yeah.
Right?
Thank you.
I'm just going to look at Stuart real quick to see if there's any issues with that request.
I just want to point out to Greg that Mr. Andrews walked down to the podium.
Do we foresee any issues with any documents? As long as people realize that a lot of the ones, especially when it comes to projections, are working documents, they can change, but...
Well, there's a variation between the extent of what's reviewed at Finance Committee to what is a board action item at the regular board meeting. Certain additional items have been provided to Finance in the past, which we have reviewed, that are not then given to the board for approval, since they're not a required item, other than bill list and treasurer's reports, which are required. Just so we're clear, it wouldn't be a migration of all that information from Finance to the board from a process, but as far as putting in information on, perfectly fine doing that.
Dr. Zerbe, do you have anything to add to that?
Again, I'm just kind of tallying up all the things that I've just been assigned this evening and trying to figure out how I'm going to get them all done in 2 weeks. So what you'd like me to respond to again, please, if you don't mind repeating that?
Can you think of any instances where there would be a document that would be presented to the board that should not be presented to the public in terms of attaching to the agenda? Is that what you're asking, Greg?
A lot of times in finance, when you'll go over data or what have you that don't necessarily appear to the board, it could be a budget projection, what have you. So is the new methodology that you're talking about including those type of documents as well? You might recall in the past we had put them up on the screen, we had reviewed them, we just never gave them out. So is that going to be given out now?
Start with
I think documents that will eventually result in an action by the board will likely need to be made available in that process. I think that there will be times that, for example, the first look at the budget, you're not going to be able to attach that in advance. It's likely that that's going to be the presentation, then it's attached up to the website the following evening. There's certain things that, and what we should do, in all fairness, is if there is an attachment to a particular item, that the attachment, we can make a note that the attachment is in draft format, and therefore knowing that there is attachment for the board members, but it's in draft format and it's not necessarily a document that will result in a particular action at the coming board meeting. It may just be information for future decisions. So I think we need to work through that. We certainly want to, and I think the message is clear that by turning this from a 24 to 72 hour process, we're trying to inform the public to the greatest extent possible, as well as providing those documents in advance as well. I think that's what we need to work towards. Will there be instances where we can't do certain things? Yeah, a matter of documents that could be related to personnel matters, et cetera. But if there's an item that shouldn't be presented, it's up to the administration to share with the committee chairpersons, and then to determine whether or not that should or should not be posted. So that would be my recommendation going forward within this new procedure.
John Andrews, Lower Providence, again. Earlier this evening, I saw Dr. Zerbe in a prayerful pose, and I can understand, he was like this, understand the assignments that he's getting. In the Upper Merion School District, the current practice, or at least the practice a year ago, was that when a preliminary agenda would be emailed to the board, it would simultaneously be posted to the public as a preliminary agenda. And then I think where they have meetings on Monday evenings, the final agenda is then posted on a Friday. Now, the 72 hours that's being proposed ahead of a Tuesday evening meeting says that the agenda will be available to the public on a Saturday evening at 7 o'clock. And I don't think there's going to be much activity preparing on changing the agenda on that day, Saturday. So I think 96 hours would be more useful to the public without harming the process in any way. Thank you.
All right, any more comment? Okay. All those in favor? Unanimous. Motion's passed, vote 9-0, 9-0. Any other new business? Okay, then we have courtesy of the floor. Or courtesy of the seat in some cases.
Well, I have a couple of suggestions, but I want to make a comment about the getting an enrollment projection, and the comment was made tonight, a second opinion. This will be a third opinion. Your first set of enrollment projections have been given to the board, previous boards have ignored, has been done by Mr. Andrews and has been done for free. I would suggest that the board utilize him. He's free. Nothing's free in this school district. And he's been dead on. If the school board would have listened to him and Dr. Malik, we wouldn't be having Skyview right now. We'd have saved us millions of dollars. Mr. Andrews had voluntarily done it. He's handed to the boards. They've ignored it. He had his enrollment projections last year, hired Pell. Pell come in, and they were kind of mirrored Mr. Andrews' enrollment figures. Why need a third opinion? It's going to cost money. And the last time we looked at an enrollment projection, it was going to cost us thousands of dollars. So I would suggest, he's already on the consolidation committee. Pick his brain. He's free. Can't say that too often. My one suggestion is about the busing. Having been in this district for a long time, my son reminded me when he was in Eagleville in 2001. I think, Mr. Harney, you weren't there yet, were you? You were
building or old building?
Old building,
Yeah.
with Mr. Davis. 2001, we had a snowstorm. Supposed to get a couple flurries. It wound up in the middle of the afternoon, looking like Saturday afternoon. My son was in first grade. The elementary, all the kids, except the high school, were stuck in their schools. The high school get out because they are dismissed first when there's early dismissal. I was fortunate enough, my husband got over to Eagleville from his place of work and brought my son home up Eagleville Road. It was bad because the Methacton school bus coming down Eagleville Road towards Visitation slid, spun around into a guardrail, and the bus driver was hurt. She had serious back injuries, which blocked the road. By 9 o'clock that night, all the kids were still in Arcola. The kids were in the elementary school. They had no one to cook hot food because the lunch ladies had already left. They were feeding them sandwiches. I went up to Arcola at 9:30 at night, up Eagleville Road, and up the driveway that couldn't be plowed because all the parents got stuck there getting their kids, and got my niece out of there. It was horrendous. It was an embarrassment. I would suggest, and I know how elementary parents feel, when there is an early dismissal because of some horrible weather, the first ones that should be dismissed are the elementary school children. They need to go home first, then middle school, then the high school. Young children in first grade, if they're stuck, they're scared. They don't know what's going on. And it may never happen again. It happened that one time. We've had serious snowstorms since. But the high school kids, I think, can handle it if they're driving their cars, and they're going to have to learn. But you need to flip the early dismissal schedule. And I know a couple over the years, parents have brought this up. It's been an issue. That's something you should consider. My next suggestion is Phoenixville School District. Every year when it comes time for a budget process, they put a budget advisory committee in place. I don't know all the specifics. I only know what the Times are reported, and they're usually a light on facts sometimes. But what they do is they bring people from the community into this advisory committee. Parents, business people, single taxpayers, seniors, anybody that can, and they all sit down and they go over with the board or the finance committee and they give all their input. And Phoenixville really takes their suggestions seriously. They listen to them. They make the community physically and mentally part of the process. And it seems to have worked because they get input from every faction. I mean, you don't have to go out and form all these committees. Just ask people if they want to be on it. Have the meeting in here. You may get some really, really great ideas from the public that you wouldn't normally hear. My last suggestion, when we have a voting session, if it goes past 9, send the kids home, the student reps. Because do they have school tomorrow? They were here late. I mean, they give the reports, and I've seen them before, leave it. But if the meeting goes past 9:30, I think for them it's a school night. They should be sent home early, and I think they would appreciate it too. So they're my suggestions, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Joe Warson, I'll make it quick. I was going to save this, but she kind of touched on one of my points that I was going to suggest as a point to take under consideration, because I know that you don't have a lot on your plates right now. But in all seriousness, tons of research has been done on the fact that teenagers require much more sleep and have much different sleep patterns than elementary children do. And a lot of school districts around the country are adopting the model of sending elementary students to school earlier and high school students to school later. And if we're going to be going down the path of visiting possible, even in the event we don't have a school closure, possible redistricting for to even out classroom sizes and things like that, I would really like to see that be one of the items taken under consideration, because it all scientific, and it's something, like I said, has been well extensively researched, that teenagers benefit from a later school day. And we all know, all of us who have young children, it's a miracle if I sleep until 7 any day of the week. So please take that under consideration in the future, and I'll leave my other items for an earlier night. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Second. All right. All those in favor? Thank you. Meeting adjourned.